Welcome into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on your Monday morning, your New Year's Eve edition of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on Jocks 94.5. No, I'm not Greg. I am not Cole. I am Conrad Van Order. I'm here alongside John Saber. We will be holding down the fort for you today for the next 3 hours, diving into what was a very interesting weekend of bowl games. Had a lot of good NFL action as well. And of course, we have to start turning our attention to the college football playoff quarterfinals that are getting underway tomorrow. We also have Alabama getting back in action, closing out their season with their bowl game against Michigan. A lot to look forward to. But I believe we're going to start off today's show with a very special guest in just a couple of moments. I do believe we have a real live Pop-Tart that is going to join us here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, because it seems like it warms my heart that the Pop-Tarts Bowl seems to have taken the college football world by storm, and that seems to now be almost universally everybody's favorite bowl game. And that was one of the games that we had over the weekend, of course, as you had Miami taking on Iowa State. That was an excellent game. We'll dive into that here momentarily. You had the Birmingham Bowl going on last week. Some not ideal weather at times. You had a weather delay there at Protective Stadium, unfortunately, but a really, really good crowd. I saw a ton of Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech fans kind of out and about throughout Birmingham really all year long. So or all weekend long. So that was really cool to see. I know over 33,000 were in attendance there at the Birmingham Bowl. So that was really, really cool for the city of Birmingham. Of course, you have USC coming back and knocking off Texas A&M. So similarly to how you had USC starting their year by beating USC or by beating LSU in Las Vegas, you then had them ending their season in Las Vegas, beating Texas A&M. So kind of book ending their year with a couple of SEC wins there. And in the middle was kind of a disaster for Lincoln Riley. So a lot to get to. But as I mentioned, we do have our guest to get to now, and it is one live Pop-Tart who you saw on the sideline of the Pop-Tarts Bowl over the weekend. Cole, how are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Conrad. How are you?
Uh,
The people were tweeting in, texting, saying, you better be on the show Monday morning to recap all this.
Of course.
McElroy and I both have Sugar Bowl radio or Sugar Bowl media days today. That gets going here in about 27 minutes. And I think I have like 12 blocks to walk to get to that because it's not at the Dome this year. It's at the hotel, which I wish it wasn't foggy. I would show you guys the view out of my room. I feel like I could like throw a football and hit the Dome from where my room is. But that's going to be fun. That's going to be cool. But yeah, we needed to talk about the Pop-Tarts Bowl
Absolutely.
and the innate skill that I seem to have of making a complete fool of myself for the viewers, in which I was asked to do it, and I said no initially. And then I began to kind of walk around and said, finally, I'm going to lean into this thing. Why would I not? It's a bowl game. I'm never doing a national championship game or anything like that. So why don't we just have fun with it? And we had a good time with it. So it ended up being fun. It ended up being entertaining. It was they did not make me do it. I did not get paid extra money to do it. Wish I would have. Did not even receive extra Pop-Tarts to do it. And the biggest maybe I guess disappointment of the day about third quarter. My first off, I have to preface this. My children got these Gizmo Habitat something watches where they can text and call my wife from their watches. Their friends have had these for years. Finally, it just kind of makes sense from being able to track them, talk to them, keep up with them. And I could also show you guys screenshots of my cell phone, which it's literally just my children's missed calls and calls, like just rapid fire, one after another. In a meeting with Mario Cristobal, and I think my phone rang 11 times just with him in there for about 20 minutes. Finally, I had to call my son back. Said, "Hey, buddy, listen, if we don't call you, like Aaron, sure, call you right back. There's maybe something going on. We may have to settle that, but nonetheless, it's kind of cool to hear from them every now and then because they can do the voice text. And I get a voice text and I check it at halftime. And to Tim, he's like, Daddy, do you get to keep the Pop-Tart costume? If so, please bring it home to us. And I was like, man,
Priorities.
maybe I should have kept it. Maybe I should have tried to get that thing in the suitcase and gotten it out of there, but I didn't. Didn't really think that was possible or feasible. I probably could have. I did not keep it, so I don't have it. That's unfortunate. I will say this: Wild Berry mascot was completely out of control. Heck, he was an absolute menace. Not only did they stuff my face with Pop-Tarts at one point during the game, that was not on camera, which was intentional. I'm not going to go any further into that. But I mean, I'm talking like this dude was catching the field goals off the net, running back onto the field, trying to punt them into the stands, like avoiding the ball boys, running away from the ball boys, like harassing the officials during the game. If I produced this game next year and they had the same cat being Wild Berry, I would have a Wild Berry cam, like a separate feed during the game. Like that's how much of a just complete terror Wild Berry was running around. As far as tasting Pop-Tarts, I think I had 9 individual Pop-Tarts during the game. We were also instructed that anytime you reference that food, it is Pop-Tarts. You never have a Pop-Tart, even if it's just one, which I feel like is important for you, Conrad, because you have a Pop-Tarts almost every day that I see laying on your desk or that you bring in. So this is important for you.
That is important.
You never have a Pop-Tart. This is from the company. This is not from me. So y'all save y'all hate tweets for somebody else. I don't need it. Pop-Tarts, even if it's just one. Now, a couple of my friends asked me that question. I said 9. They're like, so you had 18 Pop-Tarts. I was like, no, these are individual. And I will say, I knew how many I was going to eat. I peeled the surroundings off on most of these. Came up with a massive invention idea during this game, which would be a Pop-Tarts cutter, which will basically be the inside square that you just like slam on top of it like you're making cookies and get rid of all that crust that we don't need. We only need the frosting part anyway. So
and
we don't need
Uncrustable for a Pop-Tart.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you're talking like, and that's what it could be called. The Pop-Tarts Uncrustable, registered trademark. And
it's a good idea.
Yeah. We got that on tape now, by the way. You steal that from me. And I want 30%. But anyway, so they gave us just boxes of them sitting around everywhere. So I tried Wild Berry, strawberry milkshake. I tried cinnamon roll. I tried the pumpkin pie. I tried grape. I did not get to the cookies and cream, which I'm disappointed because Jordan said how good it was.
Wait, so was the
I did not try one without frosting.
Was cinnamon roll good? Because that's the one that got sacrificed, right? On the field?
Cinnamon roll was probably the furthest up the charts that I would not have expected to maybe be in the top 3, but probably ended up in the top 3.
Okay.
So like they made a massive leap up the rankings during the game. But still, Wild Berry would be number 1 for me.
Oh, yeah,
and just OG strawberry. OG strawberry's got the sprinkles, and it's just tough to beat because you can never go wrong. But Wild Berry with that extra frosting, it cements itself at the top, literally, with the frosting cemented all over it. So that's going to be there. But yeah, I ate a bunch, and then they jammed my mouth full with a bunch more. I had to do that during one of the timeouts. So it was fun. It was entertaining. And the other part that I'll just get to quickly is the Cam Ward situation, because I know y'all are going to ask me about that anyway.
Yep.
And I know I'm taking over, but I only have like 2 more minutes, and I'm going to do this, and y'all can say whatever you want about me after that. We were not aware of any plan for Cam Ward. We were told that everything was going to be normal. That's what we got from the coaching staff. And the vibe that we got, because of just we didn't meet with him in person. He got on a Zoom with us, and his camera wasn't on. And kind of how that got moved around a little bit, the way that Mario was discussing it. I'll lay it out this way. Jordan didn't think Cam Ward was going to play. Tom thought Cam Ward was going to play either a series or a half. I was just like, I think he's going to play, and I think my personal opinion is it depends on how the game goes. So there was nothing before the game that was said to us from the standpoint of he's going to play a half and he's done, or he's going to get the record and he's done, or depending on what the score of the game. None of that. Nobody said anything about that, so we didn't know any of that. We actually had the option at halftime, I did, to ask Mario about Cam playing in the second half. And just to give the viewers and listeners now an idea of where we were, we kicked it around in one of the commercial breaks. My producer was on me to ask Mario about Cam Ward in the second half. And that's his job. And Billy Palladino is a great producer. He does an awesome job. And in this instance, he was right and I was wrong. But when we were discussing this, I said to him, Billy, I don't feel like he's in this game. It's a competitive game. Why would he come out? Because we had heard all these stories about him being in the facility at 5:30, how he held his receivers accountable. He's texting the receivers the first day that he got there saying, hey man, if y'all aren't up here watching film with me and I don't know, what to do, don't expect the football. He had one receiver that was throwing with Lamar Jackson I think either up in Tampa or somewhere away from where they were working out in Coral Gables, 30 minutes away, something like that. And he texts all the receivers and he's like, "Hey man, I'm throwing with Lamar. Like we're getting these workouts in." He goes, "Well, I hope Lamar's throwing to you next year because I sure as hell won't be." Like this is the dude's first week in Coral Gables. Like that's the kind of leader and the kind of guy that he was. So we heard all these stories. Like I talked to Restrepo during the week, and he's like, "Man, he changed the entire dynamic in our football facility. Like that's the kind of guy that he is." So we heard all that. We talked to Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, about that, and Mario. So I'm sitting there thinking, we don't even need to ask that question. Like he's gonna no. And I asked Tom and Jordan. We went to another break, and I was like, "What do y'all think?" And they both said, "No, like the dude's playing. Look how this game's going. He's making plays. He's moving around. He's throwing passes. Like it never crossed our minds that he wouldn't play." Could we have probably discussed it a little bit more in the second half? Maybe, but it was a competitive football game at that point. So you want to talk probably mostly scheme, things like that. It just goes in the long list of things in college football, guys, that I don't like, but I understand. Like I get it. Will I ever completely, you know, be okay with bailing on your team at halftime? I'm quitting on your team at halftime? No. Do I know if it was pre-planned? I have no idea. Do I think it potentially was? Yes, I do. Because it just the whole vibe with it all was odd and weird and off. Now I don't blame Mario for letting him only play a half. I don't blame him for only playing a half. I mean, look what he did for that program. And he went out there and gave him a half and he played. If I'm on that team, does it piss me off? Yes. But I'm also pretty glad he played for a half because you're probably not in that game if he doesn't play for a half, based on what we saw from the backup. Emory didn't look good at all. So it's just one of these new college football oddities that old heads like me are never going to like and never truly be okay with. But I'm kind of done being mad at it because I just think that we're banging our head against the wall if we're going to be pissed off at it because it's going to keep happening. And he went out there and at least played a half. I'm going to give him some credit for that. Do I like the fact that he quit at the halftime? No, I don't. Do I wish he would have kept playing? Yes, I do, but I get it and I understand it. I've never been in that situation. I've never almost been the number one overall pick. So that's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I know there's probably more y'all wanted to ask, but that's all I got for you right now.
We know you got to go.
Appreciate you, Cole. Thanks for
man.
hopping on, man.
Thanks for hopping on, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Hey, if we get some dead time over there, like in between teams or something, I'll call you guys and we'll try to hop on and talk about some more junk.
Sounds
Because
good, man.
basically that's what my weekend was. I filled up people's televisions with junk.
We'll go eat some more Pop-Tarts.
I think I'm good for a while on those, but yeah.
Easier to eat Pop-Tart or Bloomin' Onion while calling a game?
Pop-Tart, not even close.
Okay, well, there we go.
And when I saw this again in Orlando, we got a little bit of rain right before the game, like a little sprinkle, and then that sun came out and the temperature goes up like 12 degrees. And that's what happened after that Bloomin' Onion. I ate about half that thing down in Tampa, and all of a sudden the sun started coming out, and it went from like 72 to 81 in 5 minutes. And I was like, this is going to end poorly. This is not a good thing. We're in a bad spot now. But Pop-Tarts, I feel like you're good just breaking off the crust, eating the inside, big bite or two, and then you're good. You can move on.
Uncrustable Pop-Tart. You heard it right here on Mac and Cube.
That's it. Double trademark.
All right. Well, that's Cole Cubelic giving us a few moments of his time this morning, talking about his time covering the Pop-Tarts Bowl over the weekend. Of course, the Cam Ward situation. We can talk about this later. I know we have to get to a break. I will just say this. What's the difference of if they had come out before the game and said, hey, he's going to play a half of football, or look at a lot of ththese other bowl games, take Alabama, for example, and we're sitting here going, maybe Jalen Milroe plays half of football, but then we kind of want to see Ty Simpson and what the rest of the future is going to look like for this team. And I understand it was a close game, but I just feel like there's so many circumstances where maybe if it was communicated better, people wouldn't be so upset about it, on top of the fact that, like Cole was saying, I think we all agree that from a competitive standpoint, you would like to see him go out there and want to win the football game. But, how many of us have been in a position to be multi-millionaires 6 months down the line and potentially be the face of an NFL franchise? So I get it. It's a world, like Cole said, that we kind of have to accept. It doesn't mean we like it, but it is just, unfortunately, the reality that we currently live in. But coming up in just a minute, we have to talk to a man that needs no introduction. The mouth of the South, Paul Finebaum, joins us next here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 7:19. Welcome back into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on your New Year's Eve edition of the show. Conrad Saber with you here until the 10 o'clock hour when we hand you off to Pat Landrum and Molly for three-man front. Appreciate Cole joining us for a few minutes to recap his time cosplaying as a Pop-Tart over the weekend at the Pop-Tarts Bowl. A lot to get into with that game. Of course, we still have the Birmingham Bowl, a lot of other bowl action to get to from the holiday weekend. But at this time, each and every Monday, we talk to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Paul Finebaum, and he is brought to you courtesy of Craneworks.
Lift it, load it, grade it, grind it, move it, haul it, rig it, dig it, Craneworks, Rentalworks, yeah! The big dog's got it.
Paul Finebaum on Mac and Cube in the morning is brought to you by Craneworks. Lift it, buy it, rent it, the big dog's got it. Now, Paul Finebaum.
Happy Monday morning, Paul. Appreciate you joining us here. You get a break from Greg and Cole for a day, so you're welcome.
That is a relief.
I hope that it is. I hope that it is for you, Paul. So something I wanted to talk about. I know we have the college football playoff and some games to talk about coming up here in the SEC, but something that it's kind of been going on for a while now. I know you've dealt with it. I know you're aware of it, but it seemed to continue to grow this weekend, and that is the national media and their it seems like their disdain for the SEC continues to grow with, when you had Navy beating Oklahoma in their bowl game on Friday and you started to have people, oh, this is the, team that beat Alabama and that's the team you wanted in over SMU in the playoffs, and just all of these narratives essentially insinuating that if you support the SEC, you don't know football and the SEC isn't all it's cracked up to be. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, Paul, and some of the national media seemingly just going at the SEC full force right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, that is going on, and we all see it in our timelines, and it's laughable. I mean, the fact that you could make an argument about what Oklahoma did in, let's be honest, a meaningless bowl game when who knows how many players were out, and draw a straight line to why Alabama should or shouldn't have been in the playoffs. What happened with SMU against Penn State was an indicator, a very strong indicator about why Alabama should have been in. Oklahoma had nothing to do with it. Nobody is making excuses for Alabama's loss there. We all know about that. We all know about the loss to Vanderbilt. But the playoffs should be about, are you capable of competing and beating a team? And Alabama showed that because they have a win against the number 2 team in the field. So I think we just have to get used to it. It is if that's all these pundits out there can grab onto, that's fine. And I hear the criticism of anybody who defends the SEC, but the SEC doesn't need our defense. The SEC is a standalone conference. It's universally recognized, and the number of national championships and playoff appearances speak for themselves. So I just laugh every time I hear some podcaster, pontificating about how great some win is or isn't compared to the SEC. Look at the top of the SEC and have a conversation. Don't worry about what happened in a Friday afternoon bowl game.
Paul, speaking of getting used to it, opt-outs are becoming the norm in bowl games, but we usually don't see an opt-out at the half. What did you think of Cam Ward choosing to sit out the second half of that Pop-Tarts bowl game?
Yeah, it just seemed appropriate, didn't it, with college football news? I mean, I did not see the first half, so I was actually flying that day. I got home and flipped on the TV and caught the end of the game, and I'm trying to figure out, I hope Cam Ward didn't get hurt, because I had seen earlier when I landed that he had broken some record, and there he was, and I'm just thinking, should I get upset about this? Should I be outraged, or should I simply accept that if you're going to pay players, make sure you pay them enough to finish the game?
Paul, turning our attention ahead a little bit, we have the college football playoff quarterfinals coming up here over the next couple of days, and one of the SEC teams still in the mix is Georgia, of course, and they're taking on Notre Dame. And I've seen a lot of people, kind of jumping on the Notre Dame bandwagon, and a lot of people siding with Notre Dame in this game. So my question for you is really just how big of a deal do you think the Carson Beck injury is, or did you see enough from Gunnar Stockton in that SEC championship game to make you feel like Georgia's going to be able to keep this thing rolling even without Carson Beck?
Yeah, that's a great situation to consider. And for all the noise in the background, I'm actually about to get on a plane to New Orleans for that game. And I think back to what you asked a minute ago, this really is the game I think that could help define the narrative because we're talking about the SEC champion. On the Carson Beck thing, I think anybody would be foolish to say it doesn't matter. And we're all acutely aware of how sporadic and erratic Carson Beck has been this year, but he is still a very effective player. And I dare say Georgia would not be in the playoffs without some of the games that he played, especially Tennessee. But I think the fact that Georgia has had 3 weeks, a little bit more than that, to prepare is significant. There's no way I can give you an honest explanation of Gunnar Stockton based on what I saw against Texas. When you come off the bench, it's always different. Nobody's prepared for you. We've seen that a million times. You have to be concerned about Georgia. I feel comfortable in Georgia because I think overall they're really an excellent team, and I still like their chances of getting all the way back to Atlanta. But you have to be a little concerned.
Paul, looking at one of the other quarterfinals, I assume that you've got Texas getting Arizona State. But what does that say about the team and the program if Texas were to lose this game in Mercedes-Benz against the Sun Devils?
Oh, it would be shocking, and just crank up all the basement dwellers, with their podcasts. And that would be if Texas and Georgia both lost. Thursday would be a bloodbath for anybody who hosts a show that talks about the SEC. I can't imagine it happening. I think that would easily be the biggest upset of the second round. But because I just think Texas is close to being the most complete team. They're difficult to watch sometimes because Quinn Ewers just doesn't quite live up often to the hype. But their defense is just so magnificent, and they have so many weapons on all sides of the ball, including running back, including wide receiver, and including quarterback. On top of maybe the best offensive line in college football. That's hard for me to believe. But check back Thursday morning if we're talking about them being knocked out.
Talking with Paul Finebaum. You can hear the Paul Finebaum Show here weekdays from 2 to 6 right here on Jocks 94.5. So looking a little outside the playoff for a second, Paul, we do have Alabama taking on Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl tomorrow. Not the bowl game that I think the Alabama fan base was expecting their team to be playing in this year, but kind of going into that game, based on what we get from Alabama in that game, what their performance is, whether it's a win, a loss, how is that going to impact, your assessment of Kalen DeBoer's first year there in Tuscaloosa? Because I think on one hand, you can say, all right, he's won more games in his first year than any other Alabama head coach. But at the same time, with all the talent he had, not getting to the college football playoff in the fashion that they lost, especially to Oklahoma, has also soured a lot of people's thoughts. So how would this bowl game kind of impact how you view Kalen DeBoer's first year in Tuscaloosa?
It's very important to win the game. What Nick Saban did very effectively in those rare years that he did not make the playoffs, was he was able, after the debacle 10 years ago or 11 years ago in the Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma, to win the bowl games in the last couple of years of the CFP era. And that sends you into the offseason with some momentum. It's not – for Alabama to win a game like this against essentially a 500 team – will not be treasured in the history books, but a loss will. And I think a loss will just simply put a smudge on this season that's almost impossible to remove. And I think especially against a team that has been so ineffective. And I know you can argue about what Michigan did against Ohio State, but Alabama has no business losing this game. This game should not even be close. I think the fact that he was able to get the key players to play is significant. But how do they play? Do they play with emotion? Do they end the season? 10 wins does matter. It's not Alabama's Saban standards, but it's still, you can still camouflage it and say, okay, Alabama was this close, and I think that's what he needs.
All right, Paul, we'll let you get out of here after this last question real quick. So in the spirit of the holiday season, with it being New Year's Eve tomorrow and then New Year's on Wednesday, do you have a New Year's resolution that you would like to see Ward Manuel and the College Football Playoff Committee make before next season?
Yeah, I mean, if they can, they have to come up with a way to do away with advancing the conference champions automatically. I mean, Boise State and Arizona State. Those two have no business being sitting there waiting for the first round opponents. That is one of the biggest and most ridiculous laws I've ever seen in the system.
All right, Paul. Well, that does it for us. I appreciate you joining us. Go have a safe flight, my friend, and we will catch up with you this time next week.
A pleasure, guys. Thank you.
He is Paul Finebaum, host of the Paul Finebaum Show. You can hear him weekdays 2 to 6 on Jocks 94.5, and Paul joins us on the Buyers Right Hotline for all your insurance, financial, and HR needs. It's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner. Paul Finebaum joins us courtesy of our friends at Craneworks. Well, bowl season is still here, and there was a lot to get to from over the weekend. The Birmingham Bowl, more Pop-Tarts Bowl thoughts, all the action over the weekend. We break it down, get your reaction to the college football action from the weekend. We return right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Appreciate you tuning in to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Conrad Van Order, John Saber with you here this morning. Appreciate Paul Finebaum joining us as he does each and every Monday at 7:15 here on McElroy and Cubelic. Good to get Paul's thoughts on Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, a little bit of a college football playoff preview, some of his thoughts on Alabama and the ReliaQuest Bowl. Paul says Alabama needs to win because it would definitely put a little bit of a stain on the 2024 season if Alabama were to fall to a 7-5 Michigan team in the ReliaQuest Bowl. But talk about a heck of a finish to the year if you're Michigan and you're able to pull off the win. You would have you would be 6-5 going into the last week of the season. Then you'll end your year with back-to-back wins over Ohio State and Alabama. That's pretty special right there. We did get a little bit of news about that game. We'll talk about it a little later on in the show, kind of preview that matchup coming up for you tomorrow. You'll be able to hear it here on Jocks 94.5. But we do know that Donovan Edwards, the star running back, the cover athlete, one of the cover athletes of NCAA College Football 25, he announced a few weeks ago that he would not be playing in the bowl game. Then over the weekend, we found out that Khalil Mullings, the other star running back for Michigan, he will also not be playing in the game. We have a number of defensive stars, your Will Johnsons, your Mason Grahams, Colston Loveland, the tight end there from Michigan, a bunch of guys that have very bright futures in the NFL will not be participating in the game as far as we know right now. So it certainly shapes up for Alabama to have a good opportunity to go in there and get a bowl win and finish their season with double-digit wins. But we'll talk more about that game coming up later in the program. But do want to talk about some of the bowl action we had over the last few days. Of course, the Birmingham Bowl, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and more. Just a real quick rundown. If you're wondering, how are all the different conferences faring in bowl season so far? I can tell you. So by conference record, we have the SEC currently sitting at 4-3 overall in bowl season. The Big Ten at 4-2. The Big 12 also at 4-2. The ACC 1-9.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Syracuse.
All right.
1-9 for the ACC. The ACC 0-10 against the spread. So if you're a gambling man and you've been gambling on the ACC, I'm sorry. That's just ugly.
But they got 2 playoff spots, so
they did.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
did. Yeah. Yes, they did, Saber. Thank you for pointing that out. The Pac-12, they are 0-1 because Washington State lost to Syracuse.
The one.
And the one ACC win. And then how about the American Athletic Conference, home of the UAB Blazers, 6-1 so far in bowl season, the best record of any conference so far in bowl season. So shout out to the American Athletic Conference. You do have one bowl game coming up today. It's the Music City Bowl from Nashville. That game's going to kick off for you at 1:30 on ESPN as Iowa takes on Missouri. Mizzou, a 2.5-point favorite there over the Hawkeyes in the Music City Bowl. And then, of course, you also going to have more football tonight with Monday Night Football as the Lions take on the 49ers. The Lions, a 3.5-point favorite in that one. But all right, let's get to some of the bowl action from the last few days. The Birmingham Bowl, what a game that was. Vanderbilt takes down Georgia Tech 35-27. And if you look at the box score, you think, man, this was probably a really close competitive game for 60 minutes. It was not necessarily the case. Georgia Tech did make it interesting there late, but Vanderbilt had a 35-13 lead with about 10 minutes left there in the fourth quarter. Georgia Tech did go on 2 long 75-yard plus touchdown drives there in the final 10 minutes to make it closer. But Georgia Tech turned the ball over twice coming out of halftime. It was a close game at halftime, then coming out in the third quarter, Georgia Tech has a couple turnovers. Vanderbilt's able to punch it into the end zone a few times, and quickly the game had kind of gotten out of hand for Georgia Tech. But Diego Pavia, I mean, what more can you say about this guy? If this had been his final career game, we know it's not because of the new JUCO ruling. He's going to have an extra year of eligibility. But this would have been a heck of a way to go out. He finishes the day 13 of 21 passing for 160 yards and 3 touchdowns. He added 84 rushing yards on 17 carries and 2 rushing touchdowns. So 5 total touchdowns for Pavia there in the Birmingham Bowl, absolutely lighting it up for Vanderbilt. Haynes King, a solid day for him through the air, 25 of 33 passing, 204 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. But the Vanderbilt defense able to contain him because he is so dangerous with his legs. Only 9 rushing yards on 11 attempts for Haynes King in the Birmingham Bowl. Jamal Haynes, the Georgia Tech running back, he did have a big day, though, with 17 carries for 136 yards. He added 5 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown as well. But it was all Vanderbilt, especially in the second half of this game. And for Clark Lee and company to be able to cap off this 2024 season with a bowl win like that was really, really cool to see. The attendance looked great. I know there was, the weather wasn't ideal. It was warm outside, at least for this time of year, but, a lot of bad storms. I think there was, I think the delay was because of lightning, and it was just kind of a messy scene, but 33,840 the announced attendance there at Protective Stadium. So a very, very good crowd. It looked great on television, just seeing the whole stadium filled like that. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I mean, all throughout the weekend when I was out running errands and doing different things around the Birmingham area, everywhere I went, I saw Georgia Tech gear, for Vanderbilt gear. And so it was cool to see, not only people come in for the game on Friday and be able to enjoy that experience, but it seemed like a lot of people kind of made a weekend of it and got to enjoy hanging out around the great city of Birmingham.
This is why I guess I understand why their bowl games have these conference, or at least these tie-ins, because you want to have that influx of both fan bases into the city. Birmingham is not too far away from either one of these. It's, I think, basically a 3-ish hour drive either way. So both fan bases not only were able to get here relatively easily, but you had both fan bases, or both teams, especially for Vanderbilt, to exceed expectation this year. Georgia Tech, I'm not quite sure where the expectations were, honestly. Looking with them finishing 7-6, it's probably about what everyone kind of expected them to. Yeah, you had the monstrous start, but then you had a couple of stumbles late. But
the Miami win, if they had beaten Georgia, that would have changed a lot of things.
So both teams, I think, can hold their heads high after not only the season, but this game. And yeah, Georgia Tech did lose the game, but they made a game out of it to be able to score a couple of times late to at least make it look respectable. And heck, they had a onside kick chance with the opportunity to at least tie it and send it to another overtime. But this was a fantastic, phenomenal game. Of kudos to Vanderbilt, because they only had 1 3-and-out in that entire game.
Yep.
And that was their next to last drive. They kneeled it out. But that was their only 3-and-out. And I think the 3 drives before that were consecutive touchdowns. I mean, they were, when the game got late and got close, they put their foot on the throat and looked like a team that, if they play like this in 2025, they are going to be a formidable force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting when we get to SEC Media Days coming up in the summer and we go and do, it'll certainly be the first time that I can remember that Vanderbilt won't be picked to finish last.
Probably
or
not. No.
Maybe second to last in the SEC. It'll be very interesting to see where they fall in that category, because they're going to be a lot closer to the middle of the pack than they are the bottom, I think. And a big part of that is because of Diego Pavia and the season that he had, and he was remarkable. And it'll be very exciting to see what he does in the future. I know Alabama and Auburn fans maybe not super excited about seeing him again, but very clearly Vanderbilt owns the state of Alabama. They beat both Alabama and Auburn this year, and then you win the Birmingham Bowl. That's pretty decisive right there. So Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, the kings of Birmingham as far as the 2024 college football season goes. We did also have the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which we talked about with Cole. Just a quick recap if you did miss the game. This was a fantastic football game. It was truly the definition of a back-and-forth game, especially in the first half, where, I mean, it was just touchdown, 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 touchdown. I mean, Miami starts off, you fumble the ball on the first play of the game. Iowa State takes over. They go score a touchdown. Then the second play of the game for Miami is a 75-yard rushing touchdown from Damian Martinez. And it just kept going back and forth, back and forth. Miami kicks a field goal there at the end of the first half to get a 31-28 lead. Cam Ward, as we talked about, first half, 12 of 19 passing, 190 yards, 3 touchdowns, absolutely torching Iowa State. And then Emory Williams comes out in the second half. I think you have a lot of people going, oh, did Cam Ward get hurt in the first half? What's going on here? And as you heard, if you missed Cole this morning, or if you heard him, what he said was essentially going into, preparing for the bowl game, the coaching staff gave no indication that they were only going to play Cam Ward for a half. There was honestly he said him and Jordan and Tom Hart were kind of going back and forth of how much they thought he was going to play, but there was no, clear tell from the coaching staff of, hey, he's going to play the first half, and then we're going to put in Emory and see what we have for the future. But that is ultimately what happens. And then at that point, in the first 37 minutes of the football game, Iowa State gave up 38 points to Miami. In the final 23 minutes of the game, they gave up 3 points to Miami. The one field goal late, the only points that Miami scored for the last almost 25 minutes of the football game. And Emory Williams comes in the second half. He's 5 of 14 passing for 26 yards. Throws an interception on the final play of the game on that kind of Hail Mary attempt. And it was just, it was ugly for Miami in the second half. There's really no way around it. Damian Martinez kind of saved the day for them. Of course, he had that 75-yard rushing touchdown, as I talked about, but had 179 yards total on the day. But Rocco Beck, the Iowa State quarterback, he had himself a day. 22 of 36 passing, 270 yards on 3 touchdowns. Plus, he had the go-ahead rushing touchdown with under a minute to go there. Miami 3 turnovers on the day for them, 0 for Iowa State. And that's a pretty easy way to look at the game and see where things went south for Miami. And, if Cam Ward stays in the game, do I think they win? Yes. Do I think there's value in evaluating the quarterback you have on your roster for the 2025? Yeah, and I think in this case, if you're Miami, it maybe makes you go, maybe we need to go portal shopping, see who's left available there, because it wasn't the prettiest sight. But again, I will say this about the Cam Ward situation. I don't like it. I wish he had gone out there. I'm sure that there's a part of him that didn't like watching the game on the sideline. But at the same time, this is a guy that's potentially going to be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in April, if not a top 5 pick, almost guaranteed. And is it worth risking that to play a second half of a bowl game? Because again, I just look at it as if they had come out and said, hey, Cam's going to play the first half of the game, then we're going to sit him and look at Emory Williams. Even if the game played out the same, I just don't think that people would be as upset about the situation because they had at least had a warning of, oh, this was the plan all along. Whereas now people can go and easily say, oh, well, he gave up on his team or he doesn't want to play in the second half. And I think we all know that that's
probably
I highly doubt he walked off into the locker room at halftime and just said, hey, coach, I'm done. I'm tired. I don't think that happened.
We're probably sure that's not the case, but we've seen Anthony Richardson do that in an NFL game. We saw Saluk, whatever his name is, the quarterback for UNLV, quit and
in the middle of the season,
leave. Right. We've seen that so many times, so nothing really should surprise us anymore. So I don't really, it's a bad look to leave potentially, the way he did, but this is a business decision now, and we're all about player empowerment. We're okay with them getting paid and doing all these things. Well, this is the fallout that comes from that. And even if he were to do this any other game, whatever this season, like probably no one would have faulted him, but you're right. If just come out and say so, like you didn't even have to tell, I understand not telling him in the meetings and everything else like that. You could tell him right before the game, hey, we got word that he's only playing the first half. Okay, cool. No big deal. Wouldn't have had a problem. And yeah, some people would have been like, well, hey, man, you're so close. Why don't you play a little more? Get the record. I understand that. But why don't you, finish it for your teammates? Because you saw that with Shador and with Travis Hunter in Colorado. You're going to see that with Jackson Dart. Why not come unfinished? But hey, again, business decision. No having a problem with it.
Plus, if you're Miami again, like let's say they go in the portal and get a quarterback and he ends up being great for him next year, you're probably going to look back and go, kind of glad Cam Ward sat out that second half and we got to see Emory Williams and realize that maybe he's not the answer moving forward. So I do want to get y'all's thoughts, 205-834-9450, get you on the courtesy GMC text line. What your thoughts are on Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, because that was absolutely lighting social media on fire. We want to hear from you when we return. The last thing I'll add on this game, so if we rewind the clock 1 month, all right, go back to the end of November before Miami played Syracuse. Since the year 2000, Miami was 50-0 when they scored 38 points and had 500 or more yards of offense in a game. 50-0. Now in their last 2 games against Syracuse and now Iowa State, they are 0-2, and they have scored 38 points and over 500 yards of offense in both of those games. So a tough 2-game stretch there for Miami and the Hurricanes. But more bowl games to react to. Want to get your reaction again, 205-834-9450. If you want to chime in on Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. When we return here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, more bowl games to get to. You're listening to Jocks 94.5. Welcome back into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you this morning, holding it down the fort until the 10 o'clock hour, and we hand you off to three-man front. Then, of course, the Paul Finebaum show coming up at 2 p.m., as he does each and every weekday here. Before we get to some of your reaction, let me tell you about our friends at Train. You don't want to get caught in the cold while you're watching bowl games this season, so schedule your system checkup now from a Train comfort specialist. Train has been recognized for 10 consecutive years as America's most trusted HVAC brand and our exclusive home comfort partners right here at Jocks. Go visit train.com today to find a comfort specialist near you. All right, let's get to some of your text, some of your reaction on the courtesy GMC text line. Some of you weighing in about Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. 205-834-9450 if you would like to chime in. Somebody text in and says, Cole Cubelic, man of the people. Pop-Tart Nation, how we feeling? Man, people just absolutely love the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it.
I don't know why it's taken off so much, but I'm glad that it had. It's been fun to watch, and it's been really enjoy. I don't know. Maybe they just realized, hey, like this is just about to be fun. You know, simple things like having the sprinkles on the sidelines, having the mascots just go wild and crazy like that. Like it's fun. That's what these bowl games should be.
Absolutely. And even silly stuff like having the mascot from last year return from the dead, essentially, and like watch the new sacrifice. And it's just the little details are incredible. Zach texted in, he says, I'm more of a toaster strudel guy. I'm more of a Pop-Tart guy. It's too much. I don't want to have to put the icing on them myself.
I think toaster strudel tastes better.
Yes.
But the ease and portability of the Pop-Tart make it the better option.
Exactly. Someone texts and says, Cole just embarrassed O lineman with his Pop-Tart submission. He should have eaten 20 Pop-Tarts minimum. Well, he only had 9.
Well, again, that it is kind of dumb that the Pop-Tarts aren't filled all the way to the end with the filling. Yeah, they've got the crust. That's just the bread. And it's just like, all right, what are we doing? If we were like that, okay, yeah, but while we don't mind bread, let's be honest, that is the worst part of the Pop-Tart is the unfrosted corners that are just dead weight.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. Let's see. We have somebody texts in and says, Connor, my biggest issue was that he played just long enough to break a personal record and then sat the rest of the game. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think he broke the record for most touchdown passes in a season in ACC history. I mean, okay, I guess if you feel like he did that just for the personal gain. I look at it as how many of these guys in these bowl games that announce they're going to play, do you expect to play the entire 60 minutes? I don't expect that with any of them. And you brought up, Shadur and Travis Hunter, and that was kind of a unique situation. I do know they had a crazy insurance policy taken out on them to kind of ensure that. I also think part of it was, let's be honest, Colorado looked really bad in that football game, and they probably wanted as many opportunities as they could to put highlights out there. And at least Travis Hunter, he did get that on the touchdown, but that's just kind of how I look at it. How many of these guys do we really expect to play the full 60 minutes? I understand the situation, and you would have liked to see him out there, but unfortunately, it's just not realistic anymore. And then we have one more coming in. It says, how does NIL play out for Cam Ward? Does he get paid for this game for clocking out halfway through his shift? I would assume that his NIL has already been accounted for.
Yeah, plus I think with that, it's not like NFL incentives where he got extra for breaking some kind of record. No, I just think he wanted to have that record, and that's fine. You may not like it, but that's how it is now.
Yeah, I agree. Well, keep your text coming in, 205-834-9450. You can hop on the phone lines as well, 1-800-239-9569. We still have more bowl games to recap. We have the college football playoff quarterfinals to get to, Alabama, Michigan, and the ReliaQuist Bowl, as well as some college hoops. So keep it locked. 2 more hours of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning coming your way. Welcome into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Conrad Van Order, John Saber with you this morning. Appreciate you tuning in for hour 2 here as we get you set for the college football playoff quarterfinals coming up starting tomorrow, actually. Of course, you have Alabama, Michigan coming up in the ReliaQuest Bowl as well. A lot to get to in the world of college football. Spent a lot of the first hour recapping some of the bowl games we got from over the weekend as well. Got to talk with Cole Cubelic, get his thoughts on being a real-life Pop-Tart on the sidelines. Also got to talk with Paul Finebaum, get a little bit of a preview of some of these college football playoff matchups, as well as his thoughts on the national media and them kind of turning on the SEC. And maybe this isn't necessarily something new. It just seems that for whatever reason this year, people are really trying to make a point out of the SEC and trying to act like it's not the best conference in college football, and the SEC supporters don't really know what they're talking about, and we live in our own little fantasy land, what have you. And that's something we may get into a little more in depth later on in the show, but Paul had some interesting thoughts on that as well. Also, a note here, we were talking about Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It wasn't the ACC touchdown record. It was so he broke the record, and the reason, I'll get to why this wasn't such a big deal in just a second. But Cam Ward in the game against Iowa State threw his 156th career touchdown pass, which breaks the record for most touchdown passes thrown by a Division I quarterback in the history of college football. He passed the record set by Case Keenum at Houston during his time there from 2007 to 2011. The reason that's not a bigger deal, though, is because Dylan Gabriel is right behind him, and Dylan Gabriel has 153 touchdown passes. So, quick math there. He is 4 touchdown passes away from breaking the record Cam Ward just set. Cam Ward does not have any more games left. Dylan Gabriel has at least one. So if he has a great game against Ohio State on Wednesday, he could potentially break the record then. And if Oregon is able to advance, then he will have, again, another opportunity to potentially break that record if he doesn't get it in the quarterfinal game. So I think that's why it wasn't such a big deal, because I know a lot of people, oh man, all-time, touchdown passes record in college football, that's pretty impressive. And while it is certainly remarkable and he's had a great college career, Dylan Gabriel is kind of nipping at his heels. And I think that's why we're all kind of waiting to see how that plays out. And if he doesn't get the record, then great for Cam Ward and we'll celebrate it. But I think we're all kind of waiting on.
Yeah.
Dylan
And
Gabriel.
there'll probably be no person pulling harder for Ohio State than Cam Ward.
I think you might be right. He's going to be a big fan. Hope he has some buddies on the Ohio State defense, because that would I certainly think that would help them out a little bit. We do have more of your texts coming in about Cam Ward sitting out. We have somebody chiming in that says, I don't think the Miami coaches will base Emory Williams' second half performance on whether they decide to get a quarterback out of the portal or not. They saw him play last year for several games. They got a win versus Clemson, and he played good ball versus a more talented FSU team last year. They will look to get a quarterback out of the portal for competition purposes. It was a little weird to see Cam Ward not play in the second half, but not surprised by anything players do in this day and age. I think that pretty much hits the nail on the head for a lot of people, as you don't like it, but you have come to accept that this is just the world that we now live in. Mike texted in, he says, yeah, Cam was going for the career touchdown mark. Dylan Gabriel is just a handful of touchdowns away from breaking it. He won't even hold it long enough to print a record book with his name in it. Well, we will see what the Ohio State defense has to say about that. We also have a text coming in that says, transfer portal, NIL, and play for games without losing a year of eligibility have ruined college football. No good player cares about his team anymore. It's all about me, and the money. I think there's a lot of money is a big factor.
Correct. And while I see where you're coming from, how is that different from any other college student out there? Because
you're trying to get a good job, right? You're competing against your other classmates to get the best job.
And any other college student could hop to any other university he wants to every single semester. So why is it different for the players that do this? Because of loyalty? Well, the coaches hop around. I mean, not just, okay, head coaches may not leave as much, but position coaches leave all the time. So how is it different from any other person on that university campus except the player?
Why did Kurt Signetti leave James Madison? He won double-digit games last year, had a lot of success. Why would you leave that for another? Oh, because they paid you more money and they give you a better opportunity.
Why on earth would you leave UNLV for Purdue? I don't mean, not to sound like McLaren and hate Purdue, but I mean, it's Las Vegas. You have the World Day and you go into wherever the crap Purdue is in Illinois. Oh, why would? Oh, right, money and better opportunity. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then David in Hoover, he texted and he says, "Trust me, the scouts were watching this one." I don't think that this is going to impact him negatively from an NFL draft standpoint at all. And I could be completely wrong about that, but again, I mean, you heard from Cole. Everything we know about this guy from his time in college is he's a great leader, he's a great teammate. Like he's not somebody that gets in trouble. You don't see him, making headlines for making stupid decisions or going out and doing this, that, and the other with his free time. It's I look, I could be wrong. Maybe there is a scout out there or a front office that looks at that and that's a non-starter for them that he sat out the second half of that bowl game. But I just find it hard to believe that the teams that are going to need a quarterback, I mean, it's him and Shadur. So you're going to take him if he's there and you need a quarterback. So I don't think that's going to have that big of an impact.
Fun fact
his
about
draft.
Dylan Gabriel, he's only passed for 4 passing touchdowns once this year.
Oh,
The Penn State game.
That's a great stat.
So it was his most recent one, but he had 3 a couple of times. The one was Maryland and the other was against UCLA. So he probably will need at least 2 games to break the record. So
And the first time they played, he had 2.
Yeah.
Against Ohio State.
Mhm.
So for what that might be worth. Let's see. Smokey from Jasper, he chimes in. He says, thoughts on all the Tennessee wide receivers entering the portal. I was told wide receiver position was the most unselfish on the field. Well, I think I know where that one came from, and Damien's not here to defend himself. So
selfish of him not to be here.
Yeah, perfect example. Thank you, Saber. That was a very astute observation. But no, look, there have been a number of Tennessee players entering the portal. I understand why that would be cause for concern. Look, I think as we've seen, this happens with every team. It's not. I don't look at that as there's a problem at Tennessee. I will tell you this. I know Squirrel White, the wide receiver, entered the portal, and it seems to be at least early indications that he might end up in Tuscaloosa, being a guy that's from Alabama, played at Clay Chalkville High School, and I guess made it known that he wanted to get closer to home, and Alabama would seemingly fit that mold. So it seems like that's kind of the early lean there. So that would be good news for Alabama, at least with one of these Tennessee wide receivers. But no, I mean, I think a lot of it is, again, you have guys that feel like maybe they should have gotten more of an opportunity this year and they didn't. And, somebody else is offering them a pay bump and, maybe more of an opportunity or a bigger role in the offense. And it is what it is. But I wouldn't look at it as Tennessee is, going down in flames or anything like that. Somebody says, I think, Conrad, I think you're wrong about the Cam Ward thing. It says a lot about who he is in the NFL. Just cut that linebacker walking off the field and not coming back. The 49ers player who did that a couple weeks ago. It says a lot about who you are in general. See, again, though, I don't think this was Cam Ward going into the locker room at halftime and saying, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore.
Correct. Yeah. This isn't him being Anthony Richards saying, oh, I'm too tired. I just can't do it. I think he had in his mind all along that he was going to only play a half. Now, whether or not he communicated that to his players, his teammates, the staff, I don't know. It stands to reason that he didn't communicate to everyone, but he also doesn't owe it to us to do that. But let me ask you this, not to say that he's this caliber of player, but didn't Randy Moss walk off the field?
Yep.
Once. Do we remember that? Or even if you do remember, does it taint how you think about him? He takes the Giants to the playoffs, like Jaden Daniels probably about to do. Are you going to care that he walked off in this one game? No.
Did it hurt Jamar Chase's draft stock when he sat out an entire season because he realized that the LSU quarterback was going to be garbage after Joe Burrow and the team was going to be trash? So he sat out an entire year because he didn't want to hurt his draft stock by playing on a bad team that he had committed to play for out of high school. No, it didn't. He was still a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's now arguably the best receiver in the NFL. It seems to have worked out okay for him. Again, I understand the frustration, and I understand that, the person that texted that in, if you are an NFL scout or you're in the front office and that affects your decision, totally understand that. That is your opinion. That's not wrong. I just don't think that NFL front offices really care about this kind of thing, in my opinion.
And let's be honest, we've also seen people that have better talent than others get a lot more breaks and leeway than some. Like if you may have a salesperson that's constantly late, but if he's the highest biller, you know what? So he's late from meetings from time to time. So what? He brings him money.
Antonio Brown got how many different opportunities in the NFL? Why? Not because he's a crazy person. It's because he's one of the best wide receivers to ever walk the earth.
Josh Gordon kept finding jobs.
Yeah. If you're, and we've talked about this before, and there's a lot of different, scenarios we can bring up here, but if your talent outweighs your baggage, you are going to continue to get opportunities. You're going to continue to get paid. That's just the way that it works. And the players that don't get those opportunities, it's because their baggage outweighs the talent that they bring to the table.
And it's not just on the field, it's off the field stuff too, because if you watch How I Met Your Mother, you know how Barney Stinson has his hot crazy scale.
That's right.
There's a certain amount of one side that you're willing to put up for the other.
That's right. It's what, like the Mendoza line or something? What
do
they
call it? Lauren Mendoza line.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. All right, yeah. See, someone else texting and they say, not one NFL team will bring this up to Cam Ward. Not one. If you think that, you're crazy. That's kind of the, that's kind of the boat that I'm in. Andrew texting says, do you think Travis Hunter goes to the NFL as a defensive back or a receiver? Oh, that is
smart. He go as a receiver because that's where the money's at.
And that's why I would lean towards wide receiver. But I also think, I'm still of the mindset. I think he will choose one side and play that primarily. I think he's going to play both ways at least a little bit. Maybe not his rookie year, but I think that's something that he will work towards. But if I had to pick Andrew, I would go wide receiver, just like Saber. Let's see. Jason texted in. He says, the Squirrel White. That is a hard name to say.
Yeah, it feels off. Yeah.
The Squirrel White news isn't surprising to me. He just looked off this year. Good luck to him in the future. # Go Big Orange. Well, yeah, he certainly didn't have the same role that he did last year. And maybe that was part of why he entered the portal, but also heard that he just wanted to be a little bit closer to home ultimately. We have somebody texting in, is Jalen Milroe going to play the whole game against Michigan? I don't know. They have not made that clear. Again, and my gut feeling tells me I think you get half of Jalen Milroe and then half of Ty Simpson. As an Alabama fan, that's what I would want. I'll be honest. I would want Ty Simpson to play the entire game personally. But that's just me selfishly wanting to see what the future looks like and give him an opportunity. But I think with Jalen Milroe wanting to come back and Booker and some of those other guys that have said that they're going to play, I think you get a half out of them. And then, if they want to give a run to some of the guys for next year.
Would you almost rather see Jalen just in the second half? I know that
maybe so,
weird,
but then it feels weird with like the way it's like, I don't know if it's disrespectful to him, but yeah, I mean, look, and it's nothing against Jalen Milroe. He has a lot of great moments during his time at Alabama. Personally, I'm ready to move on in the future of quarterbacks at the University of Alabama. But hey, I understand you want to give the guy he wants to play in the bowl game, let him play in the bowl game. I don't have a problem with that. He deserves that for, everything that he's done as a leader the last couple of years. You give him that opportunity. I would not expect him to play the entire bowl game, though. Let's see. Somebody else texted in and says, you guys do not know Cam Ward. Why do you keep telling us what he was thinking or about his character? Okay, why are you assuming that you do know Cam Ward? You're insinuating that we don't know him and you do know him. We just talked to Cole Cubelic, who did how many hours of prep for this bowl game and talking with the coaching staff and talking with the players and having an understanding. I think, no offense, buddy, I think we have a better understanding of what this guy's character is than you probably do. But, to each their own. All right, let's go to the phone lines real quick. Don's been waiting patiently on hold. How are you doing this morning, Don? Appreciate you calling in.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you guys?
Doing well, Don. You have a good weekend?
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir, buddy. But I was calling about the Miami game. As you know, I have a lot of Miami friends out there. They are not happy about what happened.
Do they feel betrayed by their quarterback, or do they feel like misled, or what?
Yeah, yes. One of them went to the game and everything. And my buddy, his name's Richard. He's in that North Georgia Cane Club that I'm in over in Kennesaw, and he said he wasted it. I talked to him yesterday. He goes, Don, I wasted my time and my money going down to that game. And he's like us, Conrad and John. I compare Cristobal to Hugh Freeze. He's a great recruiter, but he can't coach on the field, kind of like my coach.
Yeah, he certainly had some blunders going back to Oregon and then Miami. I think we all remember the Georgia Tech game last year as well. And yeah, it's been a little bit rough. Have you talked to Bama Hater? Haven't heard from him this morning.
Yep. Sorry about that. My GPS was going off.
No, you're good. I was just asking, have you heard from Bama Hater? I haven't heard from him this morning, Don.
No, he stopped calling y'all, but
He did.
trying to tell you, he calls the weekend show and everything. I don't know what his deal is. Like, he's a good guy, everything, but I don't understand the deal, Conrad.
Oh, yeah. Hey, it is what it is. I just, was curious about his thoughts on the whole Cam Ward situation.
If you can understand crazy, maybe then you're crazy. So if you can't understand crazy,
Well, I mean,
maybe it's the best.
I mean, I've never seen a team that is that good on offense and that bad on defense.
Yeah, it's not great. It's kind of like LSU last year in a lot of ways. Some similarities there.
Yeah, that's good comparison. Good comparison. But anyway, guys, I want to wish everybody a happy New Year out there. I know my buddies FSU Dave and PG are listening in and everything. And actually, Conrad, PG's giving me heck about them passing me in the recruiting rankings, and they probably will.
Are we talking about for 2026 now?
No. There's still some people out there for 25.
I mean, I know we've got the next signing class. I thought we were just already looking ahead to 2026. You know what?
Yeah, well, yeah, in a way we are. In a way we are, because Auburn's off to a good start for the 26 class. But we got to get a couple more guys from the portal. And you brought up Tennessee. I think we're talking to the defensive lineman that entered last week.
Yeah, I saw a couple of guys there from Tennessee that look like they may be ending up back here in the SEC. But hey, you can tell PG you still haven't beaten the transfer portal rankings.
That's right. Well, buddy, hey guys, y'all have a happy New Year, and I will see y'all soon.
Sounds good, Don. Appreciate you calling in as you do each and every morning here. We have some more phone calls coming in, some more texts to get to. Coming up here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, I want to spend a little bit of time breaking down this Alabama-Michigan game in the ReliQuest Bowl. Again, that game is going to be coming up tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. So when we return here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, we'll spend some time breaking down Alabama's last game of the 2024 season as they take on Michigan in the ReliQuest Bowl. You're listening to Jocks 94.5. Welcome back into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Conrad Van Order, John Zaber here with you until the 10 o'clock hour. Appreciate everyone chiming in so far this morning with your reaction to a lot of it. Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. 205-834-9450. Continue to send your text into the Courtesy GMC text line, 1-800-239-9569. Get you on the phone lines as well. Want to get more of your reaction here coming up, but do want to take some time to talk about Alabama and their bowl game against Michigan coming up tomorrow there in the ReliaQuest Bowl. But first, a little bit, maybe not news, maybe some rumblings around the college football playoff, because, you know, if you heard what we talked about with Paul, part of what we were talking about was the playoff and the way that the seeding works, and that's been a big pain point for a lot of people so far with the new 12-team format is, you know, should the Boise States and Arizona States of the world really be getting a first-round bye over, you know, a team like a Penn State or a Texas or, you know, some of these other teams that were ranked higher than them but didn't get the automatic bye because they won their conference championship? Well, Brett McMurphy, he put out a tweet a few moments ago saying that he was talking with some of his sources about the upcoming college football playoff negotiations, because after the season, the commissioners are going to get together and potentially, you know, if there's something they think they can fix for 2025, they will get to vote on that, and they will get to talk about kind of how this first year went and what needs to change moving forward. So Brett McMurphy, he says, quote, "There will be in-depth discussions about not guaranteeing conference champs the top 4 playoff seeds in 2025. The top 5 conference champs would still get in the playoff, but the rankings would determine the seeds. This would require unanimous approval by all stakeholders to change in 2025, but the conference commissioners are open to getting the seeding right," according to his sources. So I think that's what a lot of us wanted to see, was you will have the top 4 teams that get buys in this scenario, where it just be the teams that are ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4, as opposed to, you know, a team like Arizona State that was like 13th or something in the last week of the rankings, and then they get bumped up to number 4 because they get a bye and they won their conference. And I think that's something a lot of us would like to see. So good news potentially on the horizon.
I'm glad it looks like we're probably going to get that, but we have to keep in mind we only have the 12-team playoff
For one
this
more
year,
Yeah.
because all of the conference commissioners and AD at Notre Dame, whatever, all of them had to agree. That's the only way they can change it immediately, as all 10, 11, however many there are, all of the commissioners and AD at Notre Dame, all of them have to agree unanimously to change something to have it take effect right now. That's why we're getting it this year, because otherwise we would have had to wait, I think, at least through next year, because if they didn't agree on anything, we would have had a 14 this year. And it most likely probably would have been Oregon, Georgia, and 2 of the following: Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame. So while that would have been exciting and intriguing, having this 12-team playoff, I do think is better for the game, and I wouldn't be surprised. Especially, it gives a team, which probably maybe your lesser schools don't want to see, but it gives a team like an Ohio State, like a crack at another bite of the apple. You give them another shot. In years past, it very well would be a Georgia or a Nick Saban-led Alabama team. They may not have been, you know, in the top 2 or 3, but you put them in the tournament, they're going to find a way to win. So if they were to ultimately do this, it just makes the most sense. But I get why we had to have it that way for us to have the 12-team playoff for this year.
Yeah, and like you said, we will have 12 teams again for 2025, but after that, they're not going to be able to expand it this upcoming season. But after this year, so heading into 2026 and beyond, that's when we could potentially see 14 teams, 16 teams, what have you, if they ultimately decide to extend it out further. But we will have 12 teams again next year, but this would certainly be a step in the right direction, I think, in a lot of people's eyes for 2025 of changing the way that the seeding works. All right, so moving away from the playoff a little bit into another bowl game that we have, and one that I know a lot of people around here are probably waiting for, maybe eagerly, maybe anxiously. I'm not totally sure how you might feel about it, but that is the ReliaQuest Bowl coming up tomorrow from Raymond James Stadium there in Tampa. Kickoff going to be at 11 a.m. on ESPN. You'll also be able to hear it live here on Jocks 94.5 as Alabama takes on Michigan there. A quick programming note. So tomorrow we will have your normal morning slate. You will have Mac and Cube until 10 a.m. Then from 10 to 11, we have a 3-man front college football preview that we will share with you. And so that will just be our thoughts kind of diving into the quarterfinal matchups. And then at 11 o'clock, it will turn over to coverage of the ReliaQuest Bowl for Alabama and Michigan. All right, so looking at the game coming up tomorrow, a couple of notes. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, both of Michigan's top 2 running backs, they will both be out for the game. Donovan Edwards had declared that he was going to be out a few weeks ago. Then over the weekend, Khalil Mullings, who is the leading rusher for Michigan this year, he confirmed that he will be sitting out of the bowl game as he starts to prepare for the NFL draft. Kind of interesting here because we've talked about guys entering the transfer portal before, their bowl game or before the college football playoff game and kind of missing that opportunity. Well, Alex Orji, the Michigan quarterback, he had announced he was going to enter the transfer portal a couple of weeks ago, but he is going to actually play in this game, or he is going to be with the Michigan team for this game. And then he is still going to enter the transfer portal. But I thought that was kind of cool with, let's be honest, Michigan being a little shorthanded on offense. They were in the regular season anyways, but now really being shorthanded with a lot of their starters being out for the game. It was cool to see him come back. And so be interesting to see what kind of a look we get at quarterback for Michigan. You saw Bryce Underwood. I saw a lot of footage of him at practice this week, and he looks like a number 1 quarterback recruit. I'll just tell you that. He's got some size to him.
Looks good, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how he does at Michigan next year. The expectations are absolutely going to be sky high. But also for Michigan, you have some of their bigger names like Mason Graham on the defensive line, Will Johnson, maybe the best cornerback in college football, Colston Loveland, one of the best tight ends. They're all expected to be out for the bowl game as well as they all prepare for the NFL draft. On the Alabama side of things, as we know, you have a shortage at wide receiver. So Alabama only has 4 wide receivers healthy for this game. Those are Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Rico Scott, and Jaron Hamilton. So your top 2 receivers and then 2 guys that had very limited roles this year in the offense. Of course, we also know that Jalen Mbakwe has been getting some work at the wide receiver position. Saw some footage from practice of him over the weekend. Looked solid. Heard some good things about him. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And then we also have, just kind of looking ahead a little bit for Alabama, you have linebacker Justin Jefferson, who it appears may be able to benefit from that JUCO ruling and come back for another season in 2025. So that would be good news for Alabama because linebacker was certainly a spot that they were going to have to fill some holes at. And then we also heard from Jeremy Bernard and Jamarian Latham, who both said they haven't made a decision on their futures yet, but after the bowl game, they will decide if they are coming back for another year or if they will decide to test the NFL draft waters. So that's kind of your availability report for the ReliaQuest Bowl that you have coming up. But let's hear from the quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Jalen Milrose. He met with the media down there at practice in Tampa yesterday. So let's hear what Jalen Milroe had to say when he was asked about Jalen Mbakwe getting some work with the wide receivers at practice.
No, he looks good. He's definitely talented. This is a guy that played both sides in high school, and so he has familiarity when it comes to playing the position. But it's been good to have him on our offensive side of the ball and just seeing him picking it up. It's been quick. It's been a quick turnaround from going to DB to receiver and how much he grabs in that short period of time. So imagine we had him the whole season. How well he'd be playing even more. So I'm definitely happy to have him on our side of the ball. He's doing a really good job.
So there you go, the quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide with some positive things to say about Jalen Mbakwe and the work he's getting in with the wide receivers. I would say that's pretty good when you're, hearing how quickly he's able to pick things up. Imagine what he would have been able to do if he had been working with the offense all year long. And as I said, you have 4 healthy wide receivers. I would imagine that Jalen Mbakwe is certainly going to get his opportunities in the bowl game tomorrow.
Especially wasn't he in the portal too for like a day and a half?
Well, yeah.
So I don't know, maybe this is what we wanted to do all along. Maybe sometimes you got to maybe shake things up just to kind of have something like this. And if he comes out and is able to look like he allegedly probably should, this could be another added weapon for Alabama.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it could be very good for them, not only in this game, but moving forward into next year. And I think that was honestly the thing that surprised me most about that whole situation was not the fact that he was going to enter the portal or the fact that, there was a rumor that Ole Miss was offering him over $1 million to enter the portal and transfer to the SIP. It was the fact that we got out of all of this was that he wanted to play 2 ways and he kind of wanted to give the Travis Hunter thing a try. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the bowl game tomorrow with Jalen Mbakwe, hopefully getting an opportunity to show what he can do there with the wide receiver group. All right, let's hear one more from Jalen Milroe. This is him yesterday. He was asked what it's been like having to watch teams like SMU play in the college football playoff while Alabama has been getting ready for the ReliaQuist Bowl.
I mean, it's definitely tough. Of course, that's one of our goals to extend our season. We weren't able to do so. But what needed to happen. So that definitely happened. And the teams that needed to be in the playoffs, they were able to be in the playoffs. And so it's now just to acknowledge that we have had to play Michigan and be our best version of ourselves. So it's all about approaching this game with the right mindset and attacking this game plan.
Great coach speak answer from Jalen Milroe there, saying the teams that what needed to happen. The teams that should have been in got in, and good for him.
I mean, he could have easily said, no, it stinks, but then turn around and be like, well, but if we would have done what we were supposed to, we would have gotten in. But a very diplomatic answer for a guy that will have a lot of scouts watching him, and hopefully, I don't know, I assume he's playing the whole game, but if he doesn't, it'll create some more controversy like we've seen from Cam Ward, but a very stoic and fine answer from Jalen Milroe on trying to explain how Alabama fans feel not being in the playoff or in the major postseason for the first time in quite a bit.
Yeah, that's one of the things I will miss about Jalen Milroe is he is the king of the coach speak. I don't know if I've heard an Alabama player that has more coach speak answers than Jalen Milroe. So he was obviously coached pretty well by Nick Saban and that staff and their time there and how he wants him to conduct himself with the media. But that's going to be interesting to see how that game plays out tomorrow. So more to talk about, kind of diving into the matchup a little bit, what we're expecting to see from Alabama as they take on Michigan tomorrow. Continue on with your text, your phone calls. See you on the phone lines, PG. We see your texts coming in. We'll get to those as well. You're listening to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning right here on Jocks 94.5. 8:36 here on your Monday morning. You're listening to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on Jocks 94.5. Conrad and Saber with you this morning, getting you set for the college football playoff quarterfinals coming up starting tomorrow night, as well as some of the other bowl action we have coming your way. It was before we get back to the phone lines and to the Alabama-Michigan game, it was a very interesting week in the NFL, and we'll get to some of that later, but I just saw this in the break. So Rex Ryan did an interview with ESPN Radio earlier this morning, and Rex Ryan reported that he is planning to meet with the New York Jets front office about becoming the New York Jets head coach once the regular season comes to an end. That's just...
Okay.
I mean, I guess he did get to a couple of AFC title games with Mark Sanchez when he was there last time, but
but that's about it.
He was the coach when Greg was there, was he not?
Yeah, he was.
That would be be interesting to get Greg's thoughts on that. I just thought that was wild. You see him on ESPN all the time. I just kind of forgot about him as, potentially wanting to put his name in the hat in the mix for head coaching jobs in the NFL. So Rex Ryan potentially returning to be the head coach of the New York Jets. We'll see how that one plays out.
After starting 9-7 and 11-5, again back-to-back AFC Championship games, then went 8-8, 6-10, 8-8, 4-12. Then walked down the street and went to Buffalo, where he went 8-8 and 7-8.
Yeah, that whole organization is just is such a bad spot right now. I mean, Tyrod Taylor outplaying Aaron Rodgers yesterday. Garrett Wilson saying that he wants to be traded if Aaron Rodgers returns because he doesn't want to play with Aaron Rodgers anymore.
Blame him, right? Yeah.
And he's probably the best player you have on the entire roster, and he's demanding a trade if your quarterback returns. A whole litany of problems there, but yeah, Rex Ryan potentially headed back to New York to lead the New York Jets for the second time in his career. So just kind of a interesting note from the NFL there. So we'll get back to Alabama and Michigan here in just a minute, but want to go to our buddy PG. He's been waiting by patiently. Don't want to leave him hanging any longer. PG, welcome into the show. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, gentlemen. Did y'all have a nice Merry Christmas?
We did, PG. How about you, man?
That was fun.
I did. A little bit of the storm the other night kind of shook me up, but we survived it. So, and a shout out to my Alabama Power employees. Yeah, but hey, guys, I like that new seating. Hopefully there's going to be some, definitely with the 12 teams now, we won't go by that conference championships and put them, in the top four. So hopefully the top four, this has got to work out better without, dealing with Boise States and Arizona States and all that. So,
Yeah, it might make the first round a little more competitive next year. We'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. Guys, I wanted to bring up about the situation of Mario Cristobal. Finally he spoke up for a change, and that's the first time I've seen a coach finally admit, I thought the worst play caller was Billy Napier. For calling plays and stuff, but by him saying he's not good at it, and by him being down there 4th and 3 and should have went for it instead of a field goal to be only up by 6, that's the second time he did that with Syracuse. I believe, and the way Cam Ward just left, at halftime, I think they would have won if he'd stayed in. But he at least played his calling, and and he really slammed Ward. So. That shows you, at least I'm surprised he even said all that, It would have been that guy at Auburn. He might not have done that, though, right, guys?
Yeah, it's possible, yeah.
Sorry, Don. Go ahead.
No, you're good, PG. So, okay, so let me ask you. All right, so let's say if Miami had come out and said before the game, hey, Cam Ward's going to play, but he's only going to play for a half. And the game plays out the exact same way. Iowa State wins at the last second. It's a 1-point game. Do you think people would be reacting differently if they had known ahead of time this was the plan instead of having it kind of sprung on them in the middle of a competitive bowl game?
Do you think he was doing that to set some records? Wasn't he setting a record and wanted to set at Miami? And then
he did do that,
Yeah, then, I wouldn't have been happy. I don't know if the fans, they want to win the game. I mean, I would have wanted to win if he's going to play like Milroe. I believe Milroe will play the whole game. What would Alabama fans feel like if Milroe took off a half and then said, well, I'm declaring for the draft, so I just want to make sure my agent's going to, I'll play the first half, but then, the second half, I've got to get ready for the NFL. I mean,
I would personally be okay with that.
Yeah,
I would actually support that.
Be prepared.
Well, we went to play when all these people, with these transfer portals going on, with Florida, when I had Trask, he was the only one to play.
Yeah.
I think it was Oklahoma. And the rest of the offense completely opted out.
Yep.
And we got slaughtered bad, and I said, this is, Trask, you should have opted out. Look at this. You played and you threw about 3 interceptions. You had no, playing with a second, third string. So, it just hurts. Like you guys tomorrow, it looks like Michigan's going to have a lot of players out, and my friend Wolverine's probably going to be upset about it that, Alabama's going to beat the tar out of us. We ain't got the players playing. But this is the new world, isn't it? Transfer portal. So, that's the way it goes. But you think McElroy will opt out to go to the pros? You think he'll declare after the game?
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to the NFL. Someone's going to fall in love. Look, I mean, if somebody was going to spend a top 10 pick on Anthony Richardson, I think Jalen Milroe is going to be just fine in terms of his draft status. So,
well, yeah, and look at the number 1 quarterback of Colorado. They say he's going to be the number 1 quarterback pick. And I don't know why, but I mean, but I know Carson Beck and all them else declared, but I would thought Cam Ward would have been a higher up than the Colorado quarterback, Deion's son. But, I guess they see what they see, the NFL, but, it's Milroe's, a lot of people are going to go after him. He's got a good arm. He's got, he's definitely a good running quarterback too, thrower. So, hey, Tampa Bay better look for a backup. And who knows, he won't be a backup at Tampa Bay. He could probably start. No, I'll give Mayfield better credit. He's had a good year. Oh, yeah, shout out to the Bucs. Just took over first place.
I was about to say, hey, appreciate you calling MPG. Yeah, the Bucs, Baker Mayfield, incredible yesterday, 5 touchdown passes. He's been very, very good for them. I will just say this. I saw a mock draft yesterday. It had Jalen Milroe going to the Cleveland Browns.
Whew.
So,
well, at least there's a quarterback they could be proud of and wouldn't have to worry about off the field.
It's about to say he'd probably be able to play pretty soon. Yeah, that would be rough. I will just say that. I truly hope for Jalen Milroe's sake that he finds a different landing spot. But yeah, that was what I saw yesterday. I saw that Jalen Milroe was predicted to go to the Cleveland Browns in the second round, actually, not the first round. So be interesting to see what his draft stock kind of looks like. And he could do himself some favors tomorrow in the ReliQuest Bowl with a big performance against Michigan. We have on the Courtesy GMC text line, we have Michael who texting in. He says, Jalen learned his lesson about coach speak after last year's Rose Bowl media sessions, then went out and came up short against Michigan last year. Hopefully he has a better performance this year. While they were in a position to win, he did have a costly fumble and tried to do a little too much with his legs instead of getting rid of the football. Yes, he did have that timely fumble late in the game last year that potentially, would have, if Alabama had kept the possession, potentially would have been able to go up and score and not have to go to overtime. And, Alabama would have been playing for another national championship, but that is not the way that it works. And he did fumble. And then you had the low snap on the last play of the game. And here we are a year later with the same matchup, but much lower stakes on the table as they get ready to face off tomorrow morning. All right. Continue to text in your thoughts. We'll keep, if y'all want to keep talking about Cam Ward, we will keep talking about Cam Ward sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Send your thoughts in, early thoughts on the college football playoff. Do you have some early predictions, some early picks? Who you rolling with throughout the week here of bowl season? And when we come back here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, we will look at some of the more bowl games coming up and a little more Alabama-Michigan talk. You're listening to Jocks 94.5. You're listening to McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on your New Year's Eve Monday morning. Conrad and Saber here with you for a little over another hour as we start to turn our attention to the college football playoff. We're going to spend a lot of time in the 9 o'clock hour looking at the 4 quarterfinal matchups, even giving you some of our picks for those games coming up here over the next couple of days. Do want to share our condolences quickly, though, because yesterday, if you missed the news, it's very sad to hear the passing of President Jimmy Carter at the age of 100. The good news that we know is that he passed away surrounded by friends and family at his home in Georgia, and it seemed like he went the way that many of us would hope to go, surrounded by the ones that we love. But very sad news to hear that the former president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, passed away yesterday at the age of 100.
Also, we lost Brian Gumbel, I think about 24 hours before that, too.
Yes, the legendary sportscaster passed away over the weekend as well. I saw they did a nice tribute to him yesterday during the NFL broadcast. And again, another guy that, I mean, even me, I know I'm a lot younger than, a lot of the people, other people here at Jocks and a lot of you listening as well, but somebody that I grew up listening to and being very familiar with his voice. And I know a lot of you out there heard him for much longer than I did. So, very sad to hear of his passing.
It'll be weird to hear the brackets come out in a couple of months and not have Greg Gumbel tell us who's in the NCAA tournament.
Yes, the one positive that I got out of this is I saw a lot of people resharing the Gumbel to Gumbel segment from Family Guy, which is excellent. And if you've never seen it, definitely recommend you go check it out. But very it's so funny. But very sad to hear the passing of Bryant Gumbel this weekend, as well as former President Jimmy Carter yesterday afternoon at the age of 100.
So looking at these playoff games coming up, granted, this is just one site and a lot of things could be different, but I just find this very fascinating and hope this isn't the trend moving forward, but I guess I get it too. I was looking at the bowl game schedule and all the games that we got coming up, and this is how I bring this up because this is how the Ohio State-Penn State game I went to like 6-7 years or so ago, this is how I decided to do it, because I remember looking at the schedule and saw tickets as low as $18.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I looked into that and found a good seat, whatever. But at ESPN site, they have the whole bowl schedule, and right now for the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl between Louisville and Washington, which is at 1 o'clock tomorrow in El Paso, Texas, you can get in for as little as $9. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not bad overall. All right. The ReliaQuest Bowl on ESPN at Raymond James Stadium between Alabama and Michigan. According to ESPN, I think it's Vivid Seats or SeatGeek or whatever whoever their person is. Tickets as low as $74. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Two kind of big names. Fully get that. Makes sense. In the college football playoff quarterfinal at the Verbo Fiesta Bowl between Penn State and Boise State, tickets are as low as $44.
Oh, that's pretty good.
At State Farm Stadium in Glendale. I was like, okay, that's fine. Now, tell me which one of these is not like the other. That same price for Georgia Notre Dame, tickets as low as $44 in the Caesar Superdome. I was like, that feels a little low, and actually might be worth looking into. Ohio State Oregon at the Rose Bowl.
That's gonna be a lot.
Tickets as low as $321.
Yep.
I'm like, that's okay.
Yep.
That's not that bad, and honestly, it'll seem reasonable after I tell you this one. Texas, Arizona State, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl.
Don't tell me it's like $500.
Triple it.
For,
granted, I don't know
for
how
Arizona State.
According to ESPN right now, tickets as low as $1,740.
Okay, I guess all the Texas fans just waited until after the Clemson game, and now they're all coming out in full force to go to the next playoff game. $1,700. So for $44, you could go watch Boise State and Penn State or Georgia Notre Dame.
Correct.
Or for $1,700, you can watch Texas probably dismantle Arizona State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Well, good to, I hope Matt McLaren saved up in his piggy bank to go to that one.
That just makes me think maybe something's wrong with their. It just stands out. I was like,
that doesn't seem right, but
what?
All right, well, good for Texas. Hey, maybe Arizona State fans, they're just really itching to go to a playoff game. I don't know. That's
But
wild.
Okay, if that is the price, then kudos to them, because honestly, that one feels like probably the most lopsided game potentially, and
Yeah.
the one least likely to have an upset. It is, as it stands now, the largest point spread. Texas,
Yes.
about a 12.5 point favorite. Penn State slightly behind that at 11.5. But let's be honest, it's James Franklin in the top 10 team.
Correct.
So if Penn State were to lose this game, that wouldn't be surprising. This, as Paul mentioned earlier, which you can catch the podcast on that, jocksfm.com, this will probably be the upset if Arizona State somehow gets Texas. And again, according to Vivid Seats, is their ticket partner, $1,740. That, wow, okay.
Yeah, that's a steep price to get into a college football playoff game. But hey, if people are paying it, more power to them, I guess. But I mean, you mentioned some of the bowl games just real quick. For your slate tomorrow, you're going to have again the ReliaQuest Bowl, Alabama, Michigan, 11 a.m. on ESPN. You can also hear it right here on Jocks 94.5. The Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl that Saber mentioned, Louisville and Washington at 1 o'clock on CBS. The Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, South Carolina and Illinois at 2 o'clock on ABC. The Kinder's Texas Bowl, Baylor versus LSU at 2:30 on ESPN tomorrow. And then you have the first playoff game or the quarterfinal game at the Fiesta Bowl as Penn State and Boise State will face off at 6:30 tomorrow night on ESPN. All right, before we get to a break, let's go to the phones real quick. Brandon from Leeds wants to chime in. He wants to chime in about Alabama basketball and their win over South Dakota State yesterday. How are we doing this morning, Brandon?
Hey, good morning, guys. I appreciate you guys taking the stand and standing in the gap for Mac and Cube. I was able to take my family to the Alabama basketball game yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about ticket prices just a few minutes ago. I mean, for $8, I mean, yeah, we were in the upper level, but we actually had some really good seats. The good thing about that is three of the people that went with us have never experienced a college basketball game, more or less Alabama or anybody.
Yeah.
But it was just a great experience. I had two special need kids, and just a big shout out to the Alabama basketball staff for accommodating us and just making it a great experience. And just want to try to put a positive note on everything.
Oh, appreciate that, Brandon. Glad y'all had a great time at the game. It was a pretty good performance from Alabama. Well, the first half was better than the second half, but Alabama knocks off San Diego State 105-82. Aiden Holloway, 8 3-pointers made, 26 points, led all scorers for the Crimson Tide yesterday. Alabama now gets ready to open up SEC play coming up this Saturday as they will host number 12 and undefeated Oklahoma. Auburn doing battle tonight against Monmouth. You can catch that game 5:30 on ESPN. Plus, coming up, college football playoff previews. Hour 3 of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning is underway here on your Monday morning. Appreciate you tuning it in. Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you, getting you set for the New Year's holiday as well as the college football playoff quarterfinals coming up starting tomorrow afternoon. Before we dive into all that, let me quickly remind you that you don't want to get caught in the cold, so go schedule your system checkup right now from a Train Comfort specialist. Train has been recognized for 10 consecutive years as America's most trusted HVAC brand and is our exclusive home comfort partner right here at Jocks. Go visit train.com today to find a comfort specialist near you. Spent a lot of time today already talking about the bowl games from over the weekend, the Cam Ward drama surrounding him sitting out the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, kind of been the big story so far today. We talked a little bit about Alabama and Michigan coming up tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. on the ReliQuest Bowl. You can hear the game live here on Jocks 94.5. A number of players out for Michigan, their top 2 running backs. A number of their star defensive players going to be out. Alabama, a little shorthanded at wide receiver, but Jalen Mbakwe getting a good run of things there at the wide receiver spot. Some good early impressions from Jalen Milroe. We got to hear from the Alabama quarterback at practice over the weekend. So things seem to be looking pretty good there. We did kind of quickly at the end, just wanted to hit this again. Somebody called in about Alabama basketball. You did have Alabama. They took on South Dakota State yesterday, winning 105-82. Aiden Holloway, 26 points. Shot 8 of 19 from deep. Mark Sears threw in 20 points. He had 6 3-pointers as well. LeBaron Philon had a career-high 21. Grant Nelson had 17. He only missed 1 shot from the floor the entire game. Alabama attempted 55 3-point attempts in the game yesterday, making 19 of them. That's good for 34%. Had a pretty good first half, had a big lead, 24-point lead. We're shooting about 42% from 3, and got cold coming out of the half, let South Dakota kind of make it a little interesting, go on a little run there, but ultimately Alabama able to close it out. And worth mentioning, Darion Reed, one of the star freshmen, he did not play for Alabama yesterday. He's dealing with an ankle or a foot injury, but it seems to be minor. He was in a walking boot. It seems like more of a precautionary thing. So he did not go, but they're not expecting that to be a big injury moving forward. And that's good news because Alabama's next game will be this Saturday as they open up SEC play in Coleman Coliseum and host the 12th ranked Oklahoma Sooners, who are currently 13-0 on the season. Also tonight, you're going to have Auburn as they take on Monmouth at 5:30 over on ESPN Plus. That will be Auburn's last game before SEC play starts for them, and they will open SEC play on Saturday as well, as they will be hosting Missouri in their SEC opener. Missouri currently 10-2. If you haven't been keeping note of the SEC is just, it's absolutely stacked right now in basketball. So it's going to be a gauntlet once we get into SEC play, but it's going to be very fun to see how both Alabama and Auburn fare.
If you haven't been paying attention, granted, I believe a new poll will come out today, but as it stands right now, number 1 is Tennessee. Number 2 is Auburn. Number 5, Alabama. Number 6, Florida. Number 10, Kentucky. Number 12, Oklahoma. Number 13, Texas A&M. Number 16, Ole Miss. Number 19, Mississippi State. And number 23, John Calipari, led, by the way, John Calipari's at Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. So you've got, what I just rattled off?
10
teams of the SEC right now in the top 25, including the top 2, Auburn, in the last AP poll, receiving about a third of the overall first place votes. Tennessee, fully understandable, 11-0 right now, or 12-0, excuse me. They have 41 first place, whereas Auburn had 21 going into the last AP poll. So that's SEC basketball for the first time in a while should be extremely not only intriguing, but rather deep too, with a lot of ranked teams already this season.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Like you said, I mean, you have 10 teams in the top 25, 5 of the top 10, 8 of the top 16 teams from the SEC. And, we'll see when March Madness comes around, but I think we're looking at double-digit SEC teams in the tournament, at least as it stands right now. It's been a fantastic start of the year for SEC basketball, and you can watch that roll on tonight as Auburn takes on Monmouth at 5:30. Again, that game on ESPN Plus. Do want to get to some transfer portal news very quickly from over the weekend. Hit on this a little bit earlier. Somebody asked about Tennessee. Tennessee did have a lot of players hit the portal after they got eliminated from the college football playoff. that's not a big surprise to me. I understand Tennessee fans, kind of freaking out a little bit, as we see with all of these fan bases. We just went through this with, with Alabama, with all the players that they've lost, and some people are still freaking out about that. And, I have some news. There's going to be 4 other teams that are eliminated from the playoff in the next couple of days, and they're going to have a lot of players that enter the transfer portal.
They have, I think it's 5 days after your season ends to decide whether or not you want to enter the portal, whether or not the portal is open or not. So between now and January 20th, the portal is going to open for 8 more teams.
Yeah, and this is not I do not think this is Tennessee's going down in flames. Watch all these players hit the portal, because, again, you're going to see that for 4 other teams coming up here over the next week or so. So, but I think the big name out of that, at least as it relates to teams here, was Squirrel White. I'm going to get that name out the first time eventually. The Tennessee wide receiver, but he announced that he's going to hit the transfer portal. He has also made it clear that he wants to be a little bit closer to home. He did play his high school ball at Clay Chalkville, for what it's worth. So Alabama seems to be an early favorite there if you look at some of the transfer portal experts on where he might land. So potentially good news for Alabama getting another receiver, and that may be something you need because, as we heard from Jeremy Bernard, at practice for the bowl game, he is undecided about if he's coming back for another year or going to the NFL draft. So you may be looking to replace your number 2 wide receiver if you're Alabama. You already brought in Isaiah Horton from Miami, so Squirrel White would be a nice addition there as well. We also have on the Auburn side we have one player enter the portal. That is Sam Jackson, the wide receiver / quarterback or former quarterback from Cal, who came over this year. He did have the 1 touchdown catch this season, but he is going back in the transfer portal. And then we have Walker White, the Auburn quarterback. Look where he ended up. He is going to Baylor, and the reason that's interesting is, who does Baylor play the first game of next year?
Can't escape it, can you?
Auburn. So a little bit of a revenge game potentially if Walker White is going to be the quarterback for Baylor, the QB1 for them as they take on Auburn in the season opener next year. Also made some interesting comments about how he decided on Baylor because they had a clear plan for quarterback development. So you can read into that what you may. We had a wide receiver from North Carolina State in KC Concepcion, who we had talked about a lot. He was tied to Alabama pretty heavily early in the portal cycle, and then Texas A&M kind of came along, and ultimately Texas A&M lands his services. So Texas A&M gets another nice piece there in the wide receiver room out of the transfer portal. This one's just kind of funny because of the news we talked about last week with Duke paying $4 million a year for Tulane's transfer quarterback Darian Mensah. Well, Tulane star running back Mekhi Hughes has now entered the portal. He had 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns this season on the ground, and Duke is in the mix. So that's kind of interesting. Just guess they checks keep rolling in there for the Duke Blue Devils, and they had their starting running back hit the portal this weekend as well. So potentially could have a new look Tulane offense there wearing Duke colors next season. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then
for Indiana.
You're certainly not wrong about that. And then a bit of an interesting, this is kind of unfortunate. You never want, it to go this way, but wish him nothing but the best in the future. But Kentucky quarterback Brock Vandagriff, kind of surprisingly, he had another year of eligibility left. He's not entering the portal. He's not going to the NFL draft. He announced yesterday that he is just retiring from football. He is hanging it up. And so it looks like Zach Calzada, the former A&M, Auburn, and Incarnate Word quarterback who transferred into Kentucky last week. It looks like he is going to be the guy next year. And Brock Vandagriff, the former Georgia quarterback and 5-star recruit, who just, it seemed like he had all the potential in the world. And it seemed like he kind of gave Carson Beck a run for his money last year in that competition to be the QB1 for Georgia. And ultimately he ends up at Kentucky this year. Has a season to forget. I will just say that. It was not very good. And he now decides to hang it up. So Kentucky looking for a new quarterback, and Brock Vandagriff decides to retire from football. So wish him nothing but the best in the future. But you did have over the weekend the transfer portal. So players can still, I think they just had to start filing over the weekend, but technically the transfer portal is closed. Again, like Saber said, if you're a team that's still playing, once your season ends, you will have 5 extra days for those players to enter the portal. Mainly that affects the playoff teams. But this part of the window, or the transfer portal window, has closed. You're still going to see some names coming in based on the paperwork that was filed and doesn't get processed for a couple of days. But we are essentially, for the most part at least, seemingly done with players entering the portal. For now, there will be another portal window in the spring, of course. But for right now, a lot of that news should start to slow down. But of course, those playoff teams are sure to have a number of players get in the portal, and they're probably going to be highly sought after because a lot of them will likely have been contributors to college football playoff teams. All right, we're going to spend some time here coming up looking at the college football playoff quarterfinals, kind of previewing these games and sharing some of our picks with you. But before we do that, let's go to the Jocks text line, the courtesy GMC text line here. A lot of you have been texting in. Don't want to leave y'all hanging. 205-834-9450. Would love to get some of your thoughts on the college football playoff matchups as well as we start breaking those down. But we start with Mark, who texts in. Mark says, if Milroe gives another Oklahoma performance, the Milroe may be tempted to stay for another year at Alabama. And yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting part of it. Again, I look at Milroe as he has the physical traits that he has. Someone is going to fall in love with them, right? We have seen quarterbacks that have played worse and have had worse college careers go on and be drafted in the first round or in the second round and be viewed as starting quarterbacks a year or two in their NFL career because of the measurables they have, the intangibles that they have. And this is a guy that's going to absolutely kill it at the combine should he go and participate in most of the drills. So I understand that concern, Mark. I mean, that is still an option that's on the table. I will just say this, though. If I'm Alabama, if Jalen Milroe does decide to come back for another year of college, personally, my personal decision, my personal opinion on this, I would tell him to go into the transfer portal and go to the highest bidder or somewhere else that he thinks he can be developed. That is just me personally. As I said earlier, I'm ready to move on to the next era of quarterback play at the University of Alabama. You know, if you feel differently, feel free to text in.
I believe it was, I know I saw Mel Kiper basically kind of say the same thing, that like you can come in to the draft if you want to, but you would probably do well with another year of college ball. Not just him. I think it was Quinn Ewers.
Yep.
There was one other quarterback that he said that were kind of surprising. It was like, you feel like that they would be taken rather highly in the draft, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't get taken highly in the draft. Just that if you could just put one more really good year, have another one under your belt, I think that could be the difference from flirting with the late first round, early second to being a top 5 pick.
Yeah, and that's a lot of money, especially when it comes to the signing bonus. And hey, who knows? Maybe he would pull a Jalen Hurts and go play with Lincoln Riley for a year at USC and try to get developed there. But yeah, I mean, I understand why people are bringing that up, but I personally think he's still going to go to the NFL. But ultimately,
I think that too. I do think he would benefit from another year. But that said, it's not that Alabama wouldn't take him back. It's just more of a. I think they're like you in that we're ready to move on to the next thing, no matter what it is, rather than stifle what we have here for another potential year and even risk losing them.
Yeah, no, I think you make a very good point there. Let's see. Somebody text in. Who had the worst college girlfriend, Manti Te'o or Travis Hunter? I mean, I guess Travis Hunter, since his was real.
Yeah, she's at least weighing him down. Whereas, at least, granted, she was, fake and catfish, but at least she made him happy.
I will just say this, whatever. They're college kids. They can do whatever they ultimately want to do. But I saw an interview with Travis Hunter where they were asking him kind of about the situation and, oh, how did you meet your girlfriend? And his response was, oh, I messaged her on, I don't know, some social media platform, and she ignored me. And then her brother found out that Travis Hunter had messaged his sister and was like, hey, you should probably respond to this guy because he's got to be something one day. So that definitely makes you feel a lot better about the situation that he's in. That, yeah, just
okay. Well,
yep.
Look, man, there's always going to be women that you'll sit outside in the car for waiting while they're doing whatever. If they're off inside doing something, there's always going to be women like that, but not very many will come out and wait in the car with you.
Yes. So best of luck to him and his future endeavors in the NFL and both personally.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
We'll see how that plays out for him. Let's see. We have somebody texting in about a suggestion for playoff changes. They said, I would have no home playoff games, plus make all the games in the dome so weather does not play a part in how the games play out. Personally, first off, I think the best part of the playoffs so far has been having those home games on campus. Yeah. And I understand the weather aspect, but I don't know. I look at it similarly to, the NFL, right? If you're the Green Bay Packers and you've earned yourself home field advantage in the playoffs, do you not want people to play you in Lambeau in January when it's freezing cold and you kind of have that advantage?
You're used to it? Yeah.
Exactly. I feel like that is kind of an advantage of being a higher seeded team that gets a home playoff game, is you get the elements on your side.
It is. And for those teams up there, y'all chose to have an open air stadium. The Minnesota Vikings opted not to. I know the Golden Gophers, they play outdoors, but they do have a lot of things that are indoors. North Dakota, the Kibbe Dome up there. I mean, there are a couple of northern schools and a couple professional organizations that opted to have open air, which, again, that's fine. Like Buffalo, you chose to have this open air stadium, so you can't complain about the elements. You knew what was happening. This kind of weather ain't a surprise to you.
Yeah, no.
You know what's coming.
Exactly. We have some people texting in. Saber brought up some of the get-in prices for the college football playoff quarterfinal games. The Notre Dame, Georgia, you could get in for $44. Boise State, Penn State was $44. And then we were looking at Texas and Arizona State, and it showed that the cheapest tickets available were $1,700. So a big difference there. But we do have some people chiming in. They say, let's see, Michael says on SeatGeek, I found a ticket, let's see, for $48. Seth in Huntsville says, I found a ticket for $33. Let's see. Somebody texting in, they say, I know the playoff tickets are expensive, but the cheapest ticket I've seen for a home Auburn basketball game is $109, and it's standing room only. Yeah, trying to go to Neville Arena that's an undertaking.
Now, to be fair, this was just, I wasn't looking directly at the sites. This was on ESPN's site, where if you look at the schedule of all the bowl games and everything, they always kind of have in the middle says tickets as low as, and that's what stood out for the Texas-Arizona State game. It showed it as $1,740, but it also showed for Auburn versus Monmouth, I think their tickets as low as $146 whatever dollars. Clicked on that, boom, I think it was like 142, but even still, it's hard to get into Neville Arena. And so that's, I guess, not all that surprising, but it's also, I don't know, maybe Vivid Seats had a little playoff boost for that one, because most of the other ones didn't seem all that high.
Yeah, and maybe so. Let's see. We have somebody texting in. They say, I wish Alabama played San Diego State yesterday instead of South Dakota State in basketball. It would have made our strength of schedule look a whole lot better. I mean, yeah, it would have, but Alabama's also played a gauntlet so far. Alabama's not hurting in the strength of schedule department. I'll just put it that way. So yes, I mean, I get you. Maybe you would like to see a bigger team, but I think Alabama also needs those kinds of games because they have played a brutal schedule so far, as has Auburn. Let's see. Pat texting, he says, I wish you would get Danny Cannell on the show so we could hear his excuses for ACC being 1-9 in bowl games. He makes a point to say something about all the other conference losses, but is silent when it comes to the ACC. Yeah, Danny Cannell was having fun on social media this weekend, but let's be honest, when is Danny Cannell not having fun on social media?
Or Saturdays 2 and 10.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. Somebody texted in, hopefully Milroe doesn't play more than the first half and Ty Simpson gets to play all of the second half. I agree with that. That is what I want to see from Alabama.
Now, remember that if he pulls a Cam Ward.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm totally ready to flip.
I'm not you. I know you were wanting this, but don't be surprised if this is in fact what happens, that Jalen only plays a half. Remember this feeling and how you're thinking right now, because all of a sudden Jalen sits out, and even if Alabama's behind, this is what you said you wanted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Mike in Huntsville, who says, I wonder how Bama Hater feels about Vanderbilt beating the team that beat his team. Yeah, I mean, by the transitive property, Vanderbilt has beaten Miami this year, as well as Alabama. Good year for them. Let's see. Jamie from Alex City texting, he says, I agree with Conrad, ready to move on from Milroe and see what the future holds. Yep, I think a lot of people feel that way. Andy texts in and says, did y'all see the video of the guy yelling high tide at the Bama football players at the amusement park this weekend? Laughed so hard because I love that commercial. I did see that video. Yeah, I saw where they were at Busch Gardens, and
that's pretty funny.
I know it was very funny. I know a bunch of players. I know Jalen Milroe didn't want to ride the roller coasters, and there were some other players that, were like, I'm kind of scared of roller coasters. Hey, to each their own. I love roller coasters, but it seemed like they had a good time there. Let's see. Someone texted in and says, home playoff games are awesome. Playing every game in a boring dome is a bad idea. Football is always meant to be played outdoors. Let's see. Someone else texting in, don't ever use Vivid Seats, the biggest scam there is for buying tickets. Okay.
Tell that to ESPN.
Good to know.
They paid a lot to be their partners, so stinks for them.
Yes.
If so.
Let's see. A couple more. Lewis texts in. He says, would be fine if Milroe skipped out after pregame warmups. No Cam Ward comparison. I think there's a lot of other people as well that would like to see that.
Okay.
Want to see Ty Simpson only. Maybe Austin Mack. And finally, Ryan texts in. He says, looking at tickets for the Auburn and Tennessee basketball game. Any guesses, Saybear?
I'm going to say $850.
$450.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah, $450 looks to be the cheapest tickets for the Auburn-Tennessee game. Thank you for texting that in, Ryan. Yeah, that's going to be a very, very hot ticket. Well, appreciate y'all texting in throughout the morning so far. Keep doing it. 205-834-9450. When we return here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, it is time to preview the college football playoff quarterfinals, starting with Boise State and Penn State. Keep it locked right here on Jocks 94.5. Welcome back into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 9:25 here on your Monday morning. Getting ready to hand you off to three-man front coming up at 10 o'clock. Pat Landrum and Molly going to be with you until the 2 o'clock hour, where they will then hand you off to the Paul Finebaum show from 2 to 6. I will be out. I know tomorrow you'll have a live edition of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Then we will have our three-man front college football playoff preview, but then we will be off for the afternoon as well as New Year's Day, coming back on Thursday to react to all of the college football playoff quarterfinal action. Look forward to hearing from all of you on Thursday and hopefully having a more competitive slate of games here in the quarterfinals. Going to break down those games for you in just a moment. But first, Kalen DeBoer speaking with the media down at Tampa Bay. Him and Sharon Moore this morning doing their pre-ReliaQuest Bowl press conference there. Just a couple of things. Kalen DeBoer asked about Jalen Mbakwe getting some looks at wide receiver. He said, quote, "I think you'll see us continue to move in this direction with him. He's been really focused on the offensive side in our bowl prep." So some more good news there about Jalen Mbakwe. Kalen DeBoer also says they're expecting Caden Proctor to be available and playing in the game tomorrow. So good news there for the offensive line. A number of players, two of them I mentioned, Jeremy Bernard as well as Jamarian Latham, not making a decision on their future yet, waiting till after the bowl game to decide if they will go to the NFL or come back. Kalen DeBoer says, quote, "A lot of guys have a good feel for where they're leaning, but there are still decisions to be made in terms of guys potentially heading off to the NFL." And when asked about his first season in Tuscaloosa, he simply said it's been a whirlwind for the last 11 months. I think that's a pretty good way
Great way to describe it.
Yes,
Yep.
Very good way to describe it again. Alabama and Michigan taking each other on in the ReliaQuest Bowl tomorrow at 11 a.m. You can hear that live here on Jocks. All right, turning our attention to the college football playoff, we have 4 games coming up in the quarterfinals. First one tomorrow night, the Verbo Fiesta Bowl, 6:30 kickoff, Penn State, Boise State. All of the games, first off, all 4 games going to be on ESPN. You can also listen to them here on Jocks 94.5. So going into this game, it's the first time these two programs have ever matched up. Boise State getting the bye after being the Group of 5 champion, the highest ranked Group of 5 champion. Penn State taking on SMU and absolutely dominating them in the first round of the playoff. So going into this game, I think for Penn State, what I've really been impressed with the last couple of games, going back to the Big Ten championship game, which they did ultimately lose, but offensively, I think we found maybe a different gear for Penn State, something that we haven't seen from them really in a number of years. And, the offense that they have with Singleton in the backfield and Aller coming along at quarterback and what Tyler Warren brings to them at the tight end spot, they have really turned into a fairly dynamic offense, especially for Penn State standards. And you're now going up against a Penn State team that, or a Boise State team that, let's be honest, you're more physical than, you're more talented than. But they do have the rest. And so it'll be interesting to see if any of these playoff games or these quarterfinals, how much does that play into any of these? Are there teams that may be having to play in the first round are a little banged up, and so they're not at 100%? Or do you look at it from the perspective of you wanted to kind of get into that rhythm and have a game under your belt to where you're not maybe getting a little rusty from having multiple weeks off leading into your first playoff game? So I think that's kind of an interesting angle to look at here. We know for Boise State, a lot of it's going to run through Ashton Jeanty. He has been absolutely incredible, arguably the best player in all of college football this year. He has 2,497 rushing yards this year, which is 132 rushing yards short of passing Barry Sanders' record that he set at Oklahoma State of 2,628 rushing yards, the most in a single season in college football history. However, Barry Sanders did do it in 11 games, whereas Ashton Jeanty is going on game number 14 here in the playoffs. So a little bit different, but nonetheless very cool. Also just kind of odd that we could see the single season rushing record broken in both college football and the NFL in the same season, because if you haven't been paying attention, Saquon Barkley now 101 yards shy of breaking Eric Dickerson's record in the NFL. So you could have both of those records snapped here in the next week or so if Ashton Jeanty goes and has a big game tomorrow night. So I think that's where a lot of it goes for this game, is how much can Ashton Jeanty bring to the table. I mean, we go and you look at what the Oregon game earlier in the year, and he played a big part in that, and why Boise State was able to make that game so close and almost pull off the big upset there over Oregon. He did say, talking to the media this week, that this is the healthiest he's been since the start of the year. He feels like he's at 100% for the first time since the season opener, so that's good news if you're a Boise State fan. But for me, just looking at this game for Penn State, they're just so physical. We know how good they can be defensively. And if you're able to shut down Ashton Genty, let's be honest, Boise State's not going to be able to win this football game. And so, that's easier said than done. If you're Penn State and you're trying to sell out against the run, that's an easier said than done. Boise State, they're solid offensively without Ashton Genty. It's just he is the engine with which that offense runs. So if you're Penn State and your physicality is able to win at the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a long day for Boise State. And again, just seeing what we have from Penn State offensively the last couple of times out on the field, I just, even if it gets into a track meet, earlier in the year, I would have said Penn State can't come back and they can't compete if you get into a scoring match. And now I kind of think that they can, and especially against a team that they're more talented in than Boise State. So, I look at this game, Penn State's an 11.5-point favorite. I think Boise can keep it within that number. But for me personally, I probably have Penn State winning by a touchdown, maybe 10, 7-10, something in there. I think maybe it could be interesting for a half, but I think ultimately Penn State's just going to be too much for Boise State. So, Saber, going into this game, how do you see it? Do you have anything that stands out to you about this matchup?
It's really Penn State's rushing defense. That's more or less going to be the tail of the tape. Not that Boise can't pass the ball against it, but that's really the Mendoza line of whether or not Penn State will actually be successful in this game. There have been 5 games where Penn State allowed more than 100 yards rushing. The 2 that are really the most recent, or at least the most glaring, the 2 they lost, they allowed 183 to Oregon and 176 to Ohio State. Now, the other times they allowed more than 100. They allowed 106 to Minnesota, where they won by 1. They allowed 189 to Southern Cal, where they won by 3. And early in the year, they allowed 121 to Bowling Green, that they only won by 7. So honestly, it sounds really easy and kind of, I don't want to oversimplify it, but they can just hold Boise to under 100 rushing yards. That's going to be able to play into exactly what Penn State wants. And if they don't, it's going to be more a competitive and back and forth game, because again, even if they allow over the 100, Penn State was able to find ways to win that game. And to be fair, yes, they allowed 183 to Oregon, but they were able to run the ball in that one too. And so the defense was more or less optional in that game. So the 2 toughest tests they faced, they ran all over them. And neither game, while they may look close, honestly, they weren't really all that close. So if they can bottle or at least limit Ashton Genty, Penn State should be able to win and have this game. But if he crosses the century mark, then Boise stands a really, really good shot to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think they have an opportunity. It's just, I'm expecting Penn State to be a little too much and too often. But I mean, you go and look at what Ashton Genty did against Oregon. We brought that up a minute ago. 25 carries, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. You do that against Penn State, you're going to be right there. And I'm not going to be surprised at all if you win the game. It's just a question of if that's going to be something that Boise State can accomplish. Because again, I would argue that Penn State probably has the best rush defense that they will have played all year long. It would be between them and Oregon. So it is. It's going to be a challenge for Boise State and for James Franklin, a chance to look again. Advancing to the semifinals of the playoff would be very impressive. I'm still not buying into the whole big game James Franklin narrative. If you beat SMU and Boise State in the playoff, that doesn't really get there for me. But if you do win this game, you set up an opportunity to play Notre Dame or Georgia, and then you win that game, we're having a completely different conversation. So a lot on the line for Penn State, obviously. Boise State hoping to play Cinderella and get the first upset of the 12-team college football playoff format. Again, that game will be coming your way tomorrow night at 6:30 over on ESPN. Then on New Year's Day, you have 3 games in the quarterfinals to get to. And when we return here on McElroy and Cubelic, we will start looking at those games. You have Texas and Arizona State. You have Ohio State and Oregon, and, of course, Notre Dame and Georgia. So we break down those games for you when we come back right here on Jocks 94.5. 9:39 here on your Monday morning. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Conrad and Saber here with you for the next 15, 20 minutes or so before we hand you off to three-man front, taking a look at the college football playoff quarterfinal matchups. Just spend some time talking about Penn State, Boise State. Again, that getting things started tomorrow night. And then you have three games coming up for you on New Year's Eve, starting off with Texas and Arizona State in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. That game going to be Wednesday at 12 noon for your kickoff. Texas, a 12.5-point favorite going into this one. And as we have now discovered, thanks to some of our listeners, the get-in price is not $1,700. You could actually get in for about $50.
Oh, I'm not surprised, but sometimes technology can fail you.
Yes, it certainly can. And I feel bad for anybody that took that as bond and went and bought a $1,700 ticket to this game. So do your research, people. Hopefully that was not you. But anyways, looking at this game, you do have one meeting between these two teams in the history of their programs. Back in the 2007 Holiday Bowl, Texas took out Arizona State 52-34 under the leadership of quarterback Colt McCoy. Little trip back in time there.
Wow, that guy.
Yeah, looky there, Greg's best friend. And then so some news for Texas, some good injury news on that front. A name that Alabama fans maybe, he kind of did some stuff here, but Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver for Texas, it is announced that he will be able to play. So he was hurt. He missed the SEC championship game with an injury, he missed the first playoff game against Clemson with an injury, but he looks like he is healthy. He is expected to play tomorrow for Arizona State. So that is good news there for Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns. But for Texas going into this game, again, similar to the Clemson matchup, except I think even Clemson probably gave you a better fight because, again, that is a program that, their head coach has experience in these moments. They have a lot of talent on their roster. It's not quite the same situation as Arizona State. They were at least able to make it interesting. It was a one-score game at one point in the fourth quarter, but now going up against an Arizona State team that, they've been a great story. Cam Scatteraboo has been one of the best stories in college football this year, the electric running back there. Sam Leavitt, the quarterback, has been very, very good for Arizona State as well. They were picked to finish last in the Big 12. They end up winning the conference and going to the playoff, and all of that is fine and dandy. But I look at this game as, not all that dissimilar to the Penn State and Boise State game because, if you're Arizona State going into this game, the area where Texas is vulnerable, or at least the most vulnerable, is going to be in the secondary. And so how are you going to be able to effectively move the ball through the air and using that to open up rushing lanes for Cam Scatteraboo? Because if you are just going to rely on him to essentially run you to a victory against Texas, I don't think that's going to happen. Your best opportunity is going to be airing it out and having success in the passing game, as we saw Clemson do, where Cade Klubnik had over 330 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. I think that's going to be your recipe for success. And then having Cam Scatteraboo being able to complement that with how good of a running back he is. If you have a little bit of success in the passing game, as we all know, football 101, it's going to open up things more for you in the running game. I think that's going to be your big key there if you're Arizona State. And if you're Texas, you should be able to win the trenches, right? You should be bigger, more physical, more talented. Sense, yeah. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it feels like that's going to be your path to victory if you're Texas. Quinn Ewers, don't get off to a slow start, as we've seen at times this year. He's had some problems with turnovers at times. If you can just keep the football safe and have even any semblance of the running game that you had against Clemson, you should be just fine if you're Texas. The way that this game gets sideways, though, is Texas has turned the ball over 23 times this year, which is by far the most of any team left in the college football playoff. Georgia is actually second most with 18 turnovers. Arizona State has only turned the ball over 8 times this year. So again, this isn't news to anybody. If you've watched college football or football for any amount of time, the turnover battle is huge in any matchup. But if you're Arizona State, maybe that's where you start to look at, hey, we're really good at protecting the football. Texas, not so much. If we can get the ball to bounce our way a couple of times, maybe that is ultimately, the path to victory for Arizona State. But again, I just think Texas is too talented, and I would expect them to be able to handle their business. 12.5 is kind of steep, but to be honest,
feels about right.
It feels about right. Yeah, I think, you beat Clemson by 2 touchdowns. I think that's about what you get from Texas. So I think Texas wins and covers against Arizona State on Wednesday.
In those first round games, there was only, as lopsided as there was only one lead change. and that was in the Texas Clemson game.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Clemson obviously led for about 12 minutes or so, because they took their opening drive down there and scored, and Texas scored and then never looked back. Honestly, I feel this game's going to play out a lot similar to that game, because Arizona State's offense primarily is scatterboo, and while Texas will eventually figure out how to contain them, I think they may find ways early on to unique and clever ways to get the ball, and it may take a little time for them to adjust and figure out, oh, this is what we've got to do to stop them. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a tied game and a half, or if Arizona State's up like 10-0 after the first quarter, something like that. But eventually Texas's talent will eventually win out, and I see this playing out a lot like that Clemson game. That Texas may be down early, but eventually they'll flex and they'll eventually take it to Arizona State.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it playing out as well. So that's going to be your second quarterfinal game coming up again Wednesday at noon. Following that, you're going to have the Rose Bowl. That's going to be a rematch. You're going to get Oregon and Ohio State. Maybe, this potentially could be the best game we get of the entire playoffs. If it's anything like the regular season matchup, which if you forgot, Oregon won that one 32-31. It was played in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. In that game, both teams had over 450 yards of total offense. Both quarterbacks threw for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game as well. So offense certainly was at a premium in that game. So do we think it plays out the same way? It's a neutral site, so you don't have the home field advantage if you're Oregon. I think what we saw from Ohio State and from Oregon, even going back to the Big Ten championship, was, these are two offenses that have great quarterback play, great wide receiver talent, really solid running backs, good offensive lines, and they both have solid defenses. I think where you have the biggest advantage of this game is Ohio State, I think, defensively has just proven to be a little better than Oregon. I think Ohio State has an argument to be the best defense in college football this season. And when you pair that with what we saw offensively from them in the first round against Tennessee, I mean, if you're getting Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and they're getting involved early, and then you have Henderson and Judkins carrying their weight out of the backfield, and Will Howard's not turning the ball over, they very well may be the best team in all of college football. And so, I expect this to be pretty similar to the first game. I think it's going to be higher scoring. And I think with the momentum that Ohio State has coming off the Tennessee game, personally for me, I think that not playing in Eugene is ultimately going to be the difference. I think Ohio State has their swagger back, and I know a lot of people are kind of doubting Oregon, which is a little surprising with the fact they were the number one team and went 13-0 throughout the course of the season. But what I saw from Ohio State against Tennessee, I can't get that out of my mind. And for me personally, I think that Ohio State's I think they're going to pull it out. I think it's a close game. I think it's a one possession type game. Ohio State a 2.5 point favorite. So I'll take Ohio State to win and to cover, whether it's by a field goal, maybe a touchdown, but I think it's a close one with Ohio State coming out on top.
This is probably your national championship game. You can
Very
make
well
a
may
very
be.
good argument that these are the two best teams in all of college football. I think Ohio State wins it. If Oregon wins it, I'm not going to be surprised whatsoever, because we picked against Oregon, or you sided with Oregon both times last year, and both times, that they let nearly everyone down. But I just think, even though Oregon got the win over Ohio State, I think that was, granted, I know it's the same coach, I felt like that was just kind of a blunder and a short-sightedness, in that they spiked the ball, or they have a little more awareness about it. They at least get somewhat of a playoff to be able to try and do something with that. I mean, plus the way Ohio State looked against Tennessee, I just think they're out for revenge, and I do think it's about as high scoring. I think it's about as back and forth, and I think in the end, Ohio State makes a play on defense to get the game over the Oregon Ducks. Well,
there you have it. Saber and I both like Ohio State there in the Rose Bowl coming up on Wednesday at 4 p.m. as Ohio State takes on Oregon in a rematch. And like Saber said, very well may be looked back on as the national championship game, as these may be the two best teams in all of college football. But we do have one more game to get to, Georgia and Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. So when we come back, we'll put a bow on the Monday edition of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning and give you our pick for Georgia versus Notre Dame. You're listening to Jocks 94.5. Wrapping up your Monday edition of McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on Jocks 94.5. Breaking down the college football playoff quarterfinals coming up. Going to talk Georgia Notre Dame here for the last few minutes of the show. Quickly, though, on the courtesy GMC text line, we have Mark who texted in. He says he likes Penn State over Boise State 34-20. Nick from Birmingham texted in with a stat for Texas Arizona State. He says Texas has covered in 8 of their 14 games this year. Arizona State covered 11 out of 13 games this year. So for anybody that likes to throw a little wager on the side there, maybe you lean a little towards Arizona State there in that matchup. All right, we do have the last college football playoff quarterfinal game is Georgia Notre Dame in the All-State Sugar Bowl. That game is going to be Wednesday night at 7:45. GMAC on the call with Sean McDonough, correct, Saber?
On the TV call, and I know Cole's on the sideline for the radio call.
Correct. There you go. So
which can be heard right here on Jocks.
Yes. So a great representation there for Mac and Cube there at the Sugar Bowl. Georgia 3-0 all-time against Notre Dame. Last matchup in 2019 in the regular season, Georgia won 23-17. If you missed any of the news, Carson Beck had surgery on his UCL. He is out for the rest of the season. He is also declared for the NFL draft. So Gunnar Stockton will be at quarterback. Notre Dame defensive lineman Riley Mills is out for the season as well. 7.5 sacks to lead the Irish this year. A big loss for them. On the good news, though, Notre Dame offensive lineman Rocco Splendor, who got injured in the first game against Indiana, he is expected back for the Irish against Georgia. So a big boost there to that offensive line. And I think this is similar to the Ohio State-Oregon game. I think this is going to be an excellent matchup. I think the physicality on both sides is going to be elite. I think what you saw from Gunnar Stockton coming back and leading Georgia to that win in the SEC championship, now having multiple weeks of prep and game snaps or practice snaps to get ready for this moment. I've already said it. I don't think that Carson Beck being out is that much of a hit to Georgia. Now, do I think Gunnar Stockton's as good as Carson Beck? No, but I think that what he brings to the game with his legs, he makes the Georgia defense or offense a little bit different. They were very Carson Beck centric. And if he threw the ball well, they were going to win. If he didn't throw the ball well and turn the ball over multiple times, it was going to be rough for them. Now with Gunnar Stockton, if he doesn't turn the ball over, what he adds, that extra dimension with his legs, I think can be big for Georgia. But on the other side, you do have Riley Leonard and the Notre Dame offense that has been on fire since that loss to Northern Illinois. And having a mobile quarterback has been a problem for Georgia at times defensively. But I guess the gist of it, my thoughts on this game, I still think Georgia, with the way that they're built, they are built for these kinds of moments. I think having a little bit of a new look on offense that there's not a lot of tape on for Notre Dame can be an advantage for Georgia. And ultimately, I just trust Kirby Smart in these types of situations. I like Georgia. They're 1.5 point favorite. I still have Georgia personally. I expect them to make the national championship game, but I have them beating Notre Dame in a close one. Saber, where are you with Georgia Notre Dame?
I do think I think Notre Dame may overall right now be the better team because Georgia doesn't have Carson Beck, but I would rather take Georgia and be wrong than take Notre Dame and most likely be wrong. So I think Georgia wins. Georgia's built to handle it. Like you said, they're not built around their quarterback. So I'll take Georgia. I think Georgia wins really, really comfortably.
Well, that does it. Those are your 4 college football playoff quarterfinal games. Again, getting started tomorrow night at 6:30. You can hear all the games here on Jocks 94.5. Also tomorrow, Alabama, Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That game kicking off at 11 o'clock in the morning. You can hear it right here on Jocks 94.5. For John Saber, I'm Conrad Van Order. Appreciate Greg and Cole letting us fill in today. They will be back with you tomorrow. 3-Man Front is coming up next.